Could we have the roll call, please?
Sure. Chairperson Ken Folsom.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Bob McCool.
Here.
Commissioners Joanne Eaton. Here. Phyllis Harden. Here. Robert Momart. Michelle Rittmaster. Here. Tom Ricker. Jim Sawtell.
Here.
Town Planner Fred Fox.
Here.
Town Attorney Liz Cross. Here.
Thank you. Next is public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items. Anyone care to make comments on anything that is on consent agenda or non-agenda items? Mr. Bickle.
Good evening, Rick Bickle, Eldorado Drive. As most of you are probably aware, I've applied for the open space on the Planning Commission, so I thought I would come down, sit in, and I took the liberty of going through the packet. And I did have a couple of things just to bring up, which I'm sure will be brought up tonight. I know your time, you're going to be very busy, so I will be brief. I guess on the sign, I was just curious why the sign needs to be 3 feet wider and 2 feet taller than the other signs in the marketplace, which I think are pretty big already. And then on section 2, in the agreement for the sign where it says termination.
Excuse me, Brett. Since that's an agenda item, you could make those comments during the public comment on that.
Oh, should I?
You should make those comments at that time.
Comments now.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, anyone else want to make any comments that are on the consent agenda or non-agenda items? Okay. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda, the approval of the July 3rd meeting minutes. Anyone have any comments? Have a motion to approve the minutes. So moved. Commissioner Sawtell, motion to approve. Second by Commissioner McCool. All those in favor?
I wasn't here.
Okay. This passes with Commissioner Eden abstaining. Okay, next on the agenda is public hearing and adoption of resolution regarding a special use permit, SUP, for monument sign guardian storage, case number SUP 2013-1. Public hearing is now open. Do we have proof of publication for the public hearing? Thank you. Proof of publication is verified. Does the applicant have a presentation?
Fred, is there anything you want to say first?
No, we'll come and say something afterwards.
Okay. My name is Kevin Cohen. Do you need my address? Is that how it's
Sure.
5249 Pierre Street, Boulder, Colorado. 80304. I'm with Guardian Storage. And I only have a few points to make, and Jim Rostadich from Civil Resources will. I think most of the discussion items might be more technical in nature, so he will address those, but just a few points. I mean, the purpose of the sign, I think the first one is just like every tenant at the Superior Marketplace has a shared monument sign there. It obviously creates awareness of our product to the local traffic via Marshall Road and Highway 36. We're about 1,000 feet back, and we actually profile every customer that comes through our door. And it's actually interesting how few learn about us from driving by even on Marshall Road. So it will be beneficial to just create awareness that we're there. The additional benefit for us is it's a directional, guidance for our prospective tenant, for somebody that we talk on the phone and we're trying to explain how to get our site. Come down Marshall Road, you'll see our sign, turn left at 76th Street. And, I think another thing is it's an appealing benefit to potential developers who might also come into that same area that we're located in. And, I hope it's recognized that we have made and will continue to make a significant financial investment in this sign. All the research we've done so far, the development, the construction, we're going to be upfronting that money. And certainly somebody else will benefit from the risk we're taking right now to do this. So hopefully it will be a benefit to somebody at some point. This is the design, and it should look familiar to what you see on Marshall Road for the Superior Marketplace signs. Like our development, we tried to kind of mimic a lot of the characteristics that are there. Nothing we've done is identical, but we wanted to fit in with the community is probably the best way to describe it. I think I'll point out to you the differences, because I think that's probably what everybody's most interested in. Number one, the base of our sign is 3 feet taller, and Jim's going to go into that in more detail, but the reason we had to do it is it sits right against the CDOT property, and the CDOT property is a tall berm, and the only way that the lower panel would be legible would be to make the base 3 feet higher, so the bottom of the lower panel basically sits equal with that CDOT property, which is higher up. So, from our standpoint, it's just going to cost us more to build. It's more stone at the base, but it was necessary so that people would be able to read it driving eastbound on Marshall Road and Highway 36. The second difference is the tower or the pillar on the left. If you drive by the marketplace, the monument signs have the pillar on the right-hand side. We've done a test drive, we've gone out there, we've put up some things, and we've driven the roads, and we found that with that berm there, that having that pillar on the outside was a real challenge to visibility, so that's why we put it on the other side. The next difference is we've added the Town of Superior logo to the pillar. We just thought it would be a nice touch. We've already been informed that that's actually not the official logo, or there's a new design, and would we be open to changing it? Of course, we want to get it right for you guys and potentially have it backlit. And we've also, the last thing would be that we've added, this is not the landscaping. It looks like Brazilian plants or something. We have a landscape plan. We've taken all the plants that are similar in the area, and I think we've actually put a lot more plants around our area than perhaps the other signs have. So I'll pass it on to Jim. If there are any questions for me, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Hi, Jim Brostovich, Civil Resources, 323 5th Street, Frederick. So I'd like to talk about the location of this sign. So first of all, this is the corner where the sign is going to go. The sign will be, the edge of the sign will be kind of back here, so most of the sign panel is actually outside this slide. One of the things we are going to do is we're going to fix this drainage problem as part of this sign. We have to do a little bit of grading work, so we're going to rip this pan out, we're going to rip out all this curb and gutter and get this place to drain properly as part of the sign. So the sign location, I apologize, this is a little fuzzy. The blue is the location of the sign. And right here, you can see this is the berm, this is CDOT's detention pond right here. And this purple line is a sight line from both Highway 170 and from US 36 eastbound. And that's really what we're aiming for. So we're trying to get this sign up high enough that this berm here doesn't block the sign panel. The green is sight distance as you're pulled up on 76th Street facing west or east, looking down Marshall Road. Those are the sight triangles required per the roadway criteria. So you can see the sign is well behind the sight distance for Marshall Road. So the base of the sign is about a little over 5 feet above the flow line of the road. So the sign base is about 4 feet tall. There's some grade in between the road and the base of the sign. And then this berm here is about 6 feet above the grade of the road. So you can kind of see that the base of the sign is approximately, it's a little bit lower than the top of the berm on CDOT's property. This is a little washed out, but we're replacing the cross span here. We have to do a little bit of drainage piping work. There's a little sediment pond here that takes drainage off of CDOT's property and puts it into a culvert underneath Marshall Road. That pond is still going to be there, but we're going to dress it up with new rocks and a lot more landscaping. This is just a topographic survey exhibit of the area. Here's the landscape plan. So you see, we've got quite a few plantings, and you saw try to read these a little better in your packet, around the base of the sign. And then we're also going to seed and improve all of the area, basically in this entire corner, to get rid of kind of the trashy look. So everything that we touch will be put back, and this will be irrigated. So this will look a lot more like the landscaping on the east side, or the quality of the landscaping on the east side of 76th Street than it does now. It's not going to be bluegrass sod, so it's going to be a little, but there will be quite a few plantings at the base of the sign, so.
Just one more thing that I would ask, just to throw out for a topic of discussion. We're gonna, I think by the time this is all done, between the engineering, the construction of the stone, the signs, the landscaping, I think it's gonna end up costing us around $30,000. And I just would ask if you could maybe have a discussion, if there's any merit to, until another tenant does come into this area, whether there might be a possibility for us to utilize both panels. I don't know how that could be done. I mean, basically what we would do is put, these are small letters, 10-inch to 11-inch letters. The ones along the marketplace are actually a little bit taller. I mean, we think it'll work, but if there were an opportunity to utilize both panels, maybe have the Guardian on top, the storage on the bottom, until somebody came up, I just wanted to throw it out there and see if there could be some discussion whether that's something anybody might be open to. Are there any questions I can answer? Either Jim or I.
I have a question. Could you go back over the triangulation visibility analysis that we've done? Because I'm looking at one of these things, and, you know, we've got a lot of cyclists that come down 76, or come down Marshall Road to 76. We've got, of course, our traffic that comes out on 76. So there are moments that it's already a little challenged, and I just want to ensure, I think the signage is good. I support that for our local companies, but I want to make sure that it really is set back adequately, and also to understand if there's any possible future CDOT stuff going on along Marshall there that would then make your setting even more compromised in terms of visibility to get out. But if you could go through that triangulation analysis or whatever.
So the town Superior street design criteria have certain setbacks and site distances that are required for the speeds along roads. And those criteria are consistent with national criteria. There's nothing real special about the way Superior looks at it. But basically, it's 15 feet off the back of the road, off of Marshall Road. So 15 feet back from Marshall Road, you need to look left and look right, certain distances. The minimum requirement for this road is you can even see 440 feet to the left. From this point, you can see almost 1,300 feet. We've actually shot that with a survey instrument. So this actually doesn't really affect any of the site distances there. Now today, it is possible that maybe you don't pull up to that 15-foot mark. You know, if you have a habit of stopping 30 feet before Marshall Road today, when the sign comes up, you might have to pull up a little bit further to get the site distance that you need. But in terms of meeting any kind of technical criteria, it does meet it. Does that answer both parts of your question?
Yeah, I'm just looking at, and again, I know that it says approximate install location, and I'm just looking at it relative to, for example, where the line is across the road there, where you're technically supposed to stop. And yeah, I think most of us inch forward of that to try to actually make sure we have full visibility. I just want to make sure, Alex, wherever you are, we've got to make sure we stay really clear on that, because these cyclists are just coming down really fast now. I've seen that, and they're harder to see than the cars, right? And we don't want to have any mishaps.
If I can add to that, the visual that I'm going on is that is the left turn lane stop line, the white line that goes across, and is that, I'm trying to tell from your picture on this document in the upper right-hand corner. If you're stopped at that, let's see, I've got this for a while. If you're stopped here, if people, are you, if you stop at the white line, which, I mean, is that, are you blocked of view from this point here? Do you have to pull farther up, or?
That's a good question.
I couldn't tell from your sight line.
Exactly that white line is, but the white line looks to me like it's further back from Marshall Road than is required by the roadway criteria.
And if that's the case, is Alex here? Yeah. Is that something we would want to adjust? So that people aren't stopping at that white line and then not able to actually have the view? I mean, should that white line be up farther, the turn, this turn line here?
Yeah, we'll look at it. I mean, it looks like it's a little
Far back?
We can adjust that.
And then does that view corridor, so we've got I mean, the bikers come down that right lane, and it's not even a right turn lane, but it's a very wide, this area right is a very wide sort of emergency lane or shoulder, and so is that being taken into account, that shoulder is visible?
Yes.
Within that view corridor, that's part of the view corridor? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Is that your word? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, question. Where are the services coming from for this sign exactly? The power or the utilities, like an irrigation system? Would there be any, or is this all native?
No, there is a, show very well here, by those of that in your packet. There's a fire hydrant right here.
Okay.
And there's a water line. We're going to tap in for the irrigation right here to the fire hydrant and put it up here so that they will have irrigation. Electrical, I actually don't know. That would be something the sign company will do a service application to Excel to get the power into the sign.
Okay, because it talked about illuminated
Yeah.
functions on the sign.
Yes.
Commissioner McCool.
The only other question I had is on the, I don't think there is, but is there a sign on the, for Costco at all on that southeast corner? Zooming in, it doesn't look like it, but I want to make sure if there was, it wasn't.
The main monument sign is a lot further.
It's a lot farther down, so we won't be blocking
There's a little
visibility.
shipping, receiving sign, that might not even be a legal sign
Okay.
or something there.
Okay, fair enough.
What's the plan for ongoing maintenance of the sign, of the landscape?
Well, all of our discussions so far, and we're still working on the license agreement, was that the town, and I'd like to know how it works in the marketplace, but what I've been told is that the town would maintain the landscaping and pay for the water.
Okay, that was noted in this packet, and
Okay.
just, that'll be a question for staff when we get to that point.
Yeah,
Okay.
and also that there would be no tap fees, for this development or this sign.
Okay. Mike, go ahead.
I just have a question about the, I have a question about the illumination, just because I'm not familiar with what a T12 illuminated cabinet means. Is it just lighted from within and not, again, I think a lot of my concern has always been unusual scatter of light or unneeded scatter of light, and having it contained to the
Yeah,
feature.
it's basically the same type of lighting, it's internal, as the
Yeah.
other monument signs there.
Okay.
There's no lights outside of the actual cabinet.
Okay,
So just the letters themselves,
Yeah.
which are pretty small, will be lit up.
okay, great,
And
thanks.
I don't know if there's lights in the landscaping,
And again, if there is, then I would want to make sure that it's contained and not just scattering light up into the sky, just,
We don't have to do any lights in the landscaping if you don't want them.
save energy, and not confuse the plants with 24-hour-a-day lights.
Right.
This plan has, not, as far as we're concerned, has no lighting in the landscape.
Okay,
If anything, I'll have a backlight on the Town of Superior logo. That's a backlight with a plate
Yeah.
logo in front of it, so that's all that is.
Okay, thanks.
One more. So the tenant portion, is this if there were a tenant at Guardian Storage, or is this any other tenant along 76 that, so this is purely a Guardian Storage monument sign? This isn't a town sign that might support another development next door to Guardian?
It's a two-tenant sign. That's everything.
But the tenant would be your tenant, or no? Or
When you say our tenant, I mean, we will still be, this is more of a legal question. We're the licensee with the town, and everything explained to me is that, we'll have the ability to bring another tenant onto the sign and actually recoup some of our costs, because, obviously somebody else benefits from it, but they're not our tenant, I don't believe. Is that, I don't know.
Oh, I was under the impression that if you had somebody that was operating a business, like, for instance, out of this Guardian Storage facility, that they would have the ability to advertise as a tenant. Obviously, you're not thinking that way, you're thinking...
No, that's one possibility. I was actually thinking if somebody else developed a parcel back there, that they would have, that would be another consideration for us. We don't have people working at our facility. It's not an office space. I doubt that request will ever come up. We think the benefit will be somebody else who also develops in this area back there.
Yeah, that's what I thought you meant.
Yeah.
By what you said earlier, but then as it said tenant,
Yeah, tenant,
What should that meant
it's
for-
confusing. It's really future.
or anybody, I mean, heck, if
Anybody.
Target wants to put their sign on there, you sell it to them, that would be
Absolutely.
fine.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to use that sign, you'd like to be able to provide the space, okay?
Okay.
And is the agreement written that way, Fred, is that,
I don't know.
okay.
That's a detail I don't know.
We've received a license agreement, and we haven't gotten it back to the town yet, but we did, we did specify that, and I'm sure we'll get your comments that, a future tenant can come on, and that we would be able to recoup some of our costs for development.
Sure, and we can talk about that detail further. Right now, as drafted, you're the only licensee under the agreement.
Correct. And I think that's the intent for it would still be
Correct.
that. Okay.
Thanks.
Is there some drainage issues on that corner that's caused by the CDOT? I mean, it's kind of the lower corner in that area. Is that what's causing all that water, Pam?
The problem actually is the pen is just flat, and it doesn't have adequate slope down into that drainage basin. It's not CDOT's drainage coming back into the road, it's the road that can't get into that drainage basin, because it's
Okay.
not properly sloped.
So you looked at that study?
Yeah.
Looked at it. Okay.
I don't know if you ever looked at it, it's pretty minimal. The whole system there. So this is a real upgrade to get that drainage working correctly.
Any further questions of the applicant? Phyllis?
We were just handed a new drawing, design color. My question is the new one that we were just handed going to be the color of the sign? Or what was in the packet, which was the purple color?
The one in your hand, which I believe matches what I put up here tonight, is the current draft. Yeah. It's not, it was a blue cabinet. It should be blue, but we were told that that wasn't as desirable, so we were trying to be easy and we switched it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
As far as the stonework is concerned, is that an exact match with the other stonework that you see in the other monument signs?
Yeah, I cannot answer it because our sign company did the design and it didn't make sense to have him, well, it may have made sense to bring him here tonight, but the whole direction was, it wasn't to match it, it was to be consistent with it. And, just like our development, it's not the exact same materials as the marketplace, but our intent would be for, like, if you're looking at it with your eye or you're driving by, you would actually notice a difference.
Okay.
That's the best answer I can give you right now.
And I have one more I have one more question or comment regarding any of the landscaping that goes between the sign toward Marshall Road. That landscaping needs to be kept very, very low and short. I've had real issues with people from Costco not being able to see cars simply coming across 76th Street because of shrubs that are 1 to 2 feet high obstructing the view. So anything that would go between the sign and Marshall Road, it's got to, my suggestion is it stays really, really low profile at that point. Nothing that would grow too much upward.
Is that more of a maintenance issue that you're addressing, or the type of plants?
Visibility, that
Okay.
if a shrub starts to grow up in that area, that starts to become that visibility issue looking westward.
Okay, well, if there is any feedback from the town on some lower profile shrubs, we should consider, we're happy to do that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions of the applicant? Next, we'll move on to staff comments or presentation. Anything from staff?
I think one of the issues that's come up here just recently since you got your packet is that you'll notice that the cap, first of all, the stone is a veneer stone, we're okay with that, and that's the bulk of the sign. That basically matches and is very consistent with the marketplace signs. What they have, though, is on the base, let's see, under the tenant panel and underneath the, well, I call it the little tower, that is a metal piece that, you know, mimics the color of the base and the marketplace signs, but they use a stone as that, and also stone cap. Their cap is on the marketplace, it's got a slope to it, so it makes it even a little bit higher. But we may want to think about whether or not you want a stone base in there rather than, and the cap top. I mean, it doesn't matter to me whether it's flat or it's got a slope or not, but it's just got a cap off that tower. It's whether you want that to be in this mullion, aluminum, whatever it is, versus a stone. So that was an issue that brought it up. The other issue that staff had was the background color of the panels. We've already crossed that bridge, and they're willing to change that color. And then the issue of whether Guardian Storage can use both of those panels to say Guardian Storage until such time as the tenant comes along, which now can be either on their site or from off of their site. So whether they can use both of those panels, they use the word Guardian Storage, or whether we leave one panel blank and they use the top panel for their business. So that's an issue that I think staff felt that they should leave the bottom panel blank until they get a tenant. However, it's whatever if you have any opinion on that one, we're open to that also. It's kind of a small one, but it is a point whether you leave that panel open or not.
Don't you think it would be more interesting, Fred, to have both the panels full? We don't know how long it's going to take to get another tenant.
That's a good point, and that's a good point. I'm neutral on personally.
Yeah, no.
I know the manager brought it up, town manager brought it up.
In other words, do it that way.
Yes.
Anything further?
No, I think they covered a number of other points, particularly about the drainage being fixed as part of the sign development. The other thing is that both the town and CDOT are right-of-way people in this corner. And so that's why the license agreement is with the town. And we also have to have a permit from CDOT. Where the two right-of-ways merge together is a little hard to determine from some of the drawings, but at any rate, both of those parties, those public parties, are interested in this deal. So the main one is for the town to be the license agreement, and that license agreement for a monument sign that is technically off-site is very similar to what we've done in other places, like we tried to mention in the staff report. In terms of Discovery Office Park, is the one that I use as an example, that right-of-way is directly adjacent to their development, but it's still off-site. It's still in the town right-of-way, even though it's directly adjacent there too. But they have a license agreement for that, their monument sign as well. So we've done this before, and CDOT itself has done agreements that are where those signs are purely within the right-of-way, particularly along US 36, as I think as you get towards Flatirons Crossing there. Some of those signs are in CDOT right-of-way. So this is not anything that's unusual. The other question that staff did discuss and have discussed with the applicant is the height of the sign. And they've rationalized that they need a taller base to get the sign up to a point where they have good sight distance, along both Marshall Road as well as Route 36. So we can buy that argument, because if you really look at the marketplace signs, they are actually, from road grade, are up on a slope, because that slopes up, particularly the first one or two signs that you see as you run down Marshall Road. So the actual total height from road grade to the tops of those signs is actually, I believe, higher than where we're at here. If not, we're pretty close to it. So I don't know if you can corroborate that or not. But I think that from our perspective, the fact that this sign is about 3 foot taller than, in terms of its construction, than what is identified in the marketplace as PD of 9.5 feet or something like that. There are these issues that create the need for have a little bit more taller base in order to get the sign up. Okay? So that's about all I think I had to add. I don't know, Lisa, if you have anything to add or?
Okay, questions of staff?
So Fred, the size difference that I think Mr. Bickle had mentioned earlier, is that primarily in the base then, as opposed to the signage part of it?
In both the size of the height of the base, which gives them essentially a 13-foot tall sign. It's also in the length of it. I look at the structure, the length of it from the end of the base cap, which is underneath the sign itself, is basically 20 feet. In the marketplace, they're supposed to be 17 feet. So we got a little bit extra height because of the reasons we just talked about. We also have a little bit extra length, which is 3 feet. Because it's in the marketplace PD, those signs are not supposed to be longer than 17 feet.
And that includes the stone base?
Yeah, the whole thing, yeah, that length includes the entire, in the marketplace side, includes the entire base length.
Does the marketplace PD address the size of the piece where the letters are on? Because I see here we're looking at, the proposal I think is 14 feet wide by 3 feet tall. Is that consistent with the marketplace?
Consistent with the marketplace.
Thanks.
If right on this, since you raised the stone base issue, which I overlooked, but that's, is it a stippled kind of finish, or is it just plain smooth finish with this Matthews color 1.661? Is it really like a cap looking thing?
I would ask the applicant if they could respond to that one. Your sign guy would be helpful.
I was about to say I'm going to be no help. I really have not looked at it or thought about it, and I don't know how it compares to the marketplace. The direction was to mimic it, so I thought it was. I don't know what's the marketplace versus this, to be honest. I mean, I would also ask, is it, a very material issue, if one's aluminum versus stone? I don't know. But I'm sorry.
No, it's just a good question. What I looked at is like, it's aluminum cap is what it is.
Right.
Structurally might be, the foundations have to be really looked at.
You might want, with a stipple, I mean, I've seen where you don't have to have smooth aluminum. I mean, you can do something to that to create a stippled texture.
Okay.
Maybe you might want to say that would be desirable if you want to leave it as an aluminum deal.
The language on the drawing states medium texture finish.
Well, I saw that, but that's like sprayed on texture,
What
huh?
that looks like, right?
What does it look like? I mean, if it looks like a cap, now that I'm thinking of it, it just looks like a cap, painted brown, with a texture in the paint.
Yeah, and that's just the cap that has the textured finish, the
Grace does not.
other piece is not.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff before we go into public comment? Any other questions? I have one. What was the reason or explanation for putting the town's logo on the sign? Because it's not on the marketplace signs, and yes,
There was no request, we just put it in to gain some points. Yeah. I mean, if there's not a desire for it, we're happy to remove it, so.
okay, we can cover that in our discussions, but just wondering if there was some direction from town.
I don't believe there was any direction from the town. I think it was just viewed as an entryway location for the
Okay.
town.
Okay, we'll go into public comment. If anyone in the audience would like to comment on the sign, now would be your time. Mr. Bickle.
Okay, I'm back. Rick Bickle, Eldorado Lund. So, thank you for addressing the size of the sign. And I do feel that if the sign doesn't look larger than the other signs, that's good. But I still don't see how, if you're flipping the sign around where the marketplace signs have the pillar towards the road, and you're putting this one with the pillar away from the road, how that's going to look consistent with the other signs, even if it looks the same size. The only other thing that I noticed going through this material that I thought I might bring to the commission's attention was on the agreement, under section 2 termination, it says that the licensee, when they release their license, is supposed to dismantle the sign and repair the area. And I thought maybe the commission might consider language could also be added that with the town's approval, Guardian Storage, in lieu of removing the $30,000 sign, could simply gift it to the town. And those were my only comments.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hello, Heather Craycraft, Superior Chamber of Commerce. Just wanted to state that Guardian Storage is a huge supporter of the community, and not only helping us through community events, they have also hosted on numerous occasions different events at their location that have deemed some extra directions that we have had to share with many, whether residents or really out of the area guests, whether it be their shred event that they hosted for the whole month in electronics recycling for the month of October. They're hosting a holiday shopping for small business owners tomorrow night at their facility, and continuously are hosting networking events and other events for small business owners. So I encourage the support of this sign.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, seeing none, we could take any final rebuttal or final comments from the applicant before we close the public hearing, if you'd like, or you don't have to. Okay. No further comments from the applicant. Public hearing's closed. Now we have comments from the commission, discussion. Who would like to start?
Well, I'll start.
Commissioner Becker.
I like the sign. I think it has a lot of good features to it. I think in light of the comments we made about this base thing with the aluminum cap and base, we might want to look at that. That might look a little cheesier than we think is acceptable. I mean, pictures always look nice, but I think we're trying to make it look like sandstone base. I guess you answered the questions on the utilities. I am concerned sometimes about how many of these monument signs the town takes on to maintain, and is there coordination between the town and the sign requester on the vegetation that we use, so it's lower maintenance and we don't have higher expenses on stuff. My comment.
Commissioner Rittmaster.
So I would agree with Commissioner Rickard that we would want, and I think as a town, we need to really get serious about xeriscaping and low maintenance and low water use kinds of plantings, and I think that this could lend itself well. Gosh, I probably should have asked this at some other time. Is there a possibility that this could be on a solar cell, so that it's lit up that way rather than extending utilities deep into that corner is another idea that we could kick around. I happen to like the Town of Superior logo on this because it is actually very close to, and I don't know if it's the sign that I can see the back of in this photograph, but it is very close to that sign as you come down Marshall Road that actually formally enters you into our municipality. So I think that's actually a pretty well-placed feature for that. And then I can understand in terms of commenting on Brent's comment that if the key of this is to have the right visibility toward 36 as well as Marshall Road, then you would need this configuration and not be flipping the stonework part toward the road. I would guess that in terms of visibility, then you would lose that visibility, particularly on Highway 36. So I think that's probably why it's configured this way.
Other comments? Mr. McCool?
Sure. I mean, I'm in favor of the sign. I think it's fine. I agree with just thinking about the landscaping, low water, and making absolutely sure there's nothing on the north side of that sign that can actually grow. We've seen many things get overgrown, and then all of a sudden you can't see around the corner, so I see that happening everywhere. So I probably want that noted, that we make sure we don't miss that when the landscaping's done. Love the idea of solar. I don't know if gray water is a possibility for watering this rather than tapping into primary water main. It may not be, but if there's an opportunity there, that would be great. And then regarding the use of the two panels, it sort of feels to me like this is Guardian Storage. I mean, they're applying for the special use permit. It's their sign, and if they want to use the whole thing and not recoup the cost, I don't, or sell half of it later, I think that's maybe their business. I'd be fine with making sure the agreement allows them to do that. I don't know if there's anything special we need to say to make sure it's used properly, but I think it should be at their discretion as to whether they want to use both panels or sell one. And then also to make sure we look at the stop line and see if that needs to be moved up so we're not stopping people at a point where they can't see anyway. So that's the only things I have.
Okay. Other comments?
No, I agree with Rob.
I think it's nicely done, good presentation. I think I would seriously consider the sandstone base in lieu of the aluminum. I don't know what that does to the cost, but I think it might be a nice aesthetic feature to the extent that you're trying to, develop consistency in the aesthetics with the marketplace signage. But otherwise, it's good. I'm in favor.
Okay. My comments, I'm in favor of the sign. I think I think it improves the corner, gives the company visibility. It bugs me that the column is reverse from the others. I'm a big consistency fan, and I think that kind of bugs me that it's reverse. this design makes a lot more sense. Why in the world they chose the other design makes no sense to me. So if we make the others change, I'd be happy with this. The town logo, I'm not a real big fan of that. It's not a town sign. Yes, it's sort of the entry point to town, but it's a privately owned and privately paid for sign, and having the town's logo on it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's my opinion. I like this idea of solar cells and Xeriscape. It's a little odd to me that the town would pay for maintenance of landscape of a privately owned sign. That's a little odd to me, and if we could tap into the gray water system or somehow do Xeriscape where we don't need water, that would be all the better. And then Mr. Bickle's comment about gifting it to the town at termination, I think that's an excellent point and should definitely be part of the agreement if we could modify the agreement as such. Makes a lot of sense. So we've heard, you've taken notes on some of our comments. Do we need to formalize that at all, or how should we do that?
Well, I think you should recommend that you make your recommendation for approval or not approval of the sign, and then with the board take up the following concerns that the planning commission has. If you have unanimous, or not unanimous, but a positive vote on each of those concerns, that'd be good.
Okay. So just in summary of our concerns or issues, the finish of the cap, number one would be the finish of the cap and the base, either sandstone or some finish to make it look darn close to sandstone would be number one. Strongly consider solar, low water options for landscape and power for the illumination. Use of both panels, I didn't mention that, but I'm also have no issue with Guardian using both panels. I think it looks like we have a vacancy there if we have a blank panel, so that does not make sense. I'd say go for it, use both panels, and just, so are we good across the board on that? Okay. Anyone else share my concerns about the pillar issue, or is that just...
Can I add something just to this? If we end up going to a stone cap and a stone base, it probably won't work with a metal framed, phony cultured stone look, so. I'm not opened up Pandora's box, that's what I was kind of hinting at.
I think some treatments could be done to the metal to make it work, because you're right, I mean, it's going to increase the weight and cost dramatically.
The foundation's going to change.
And is it needed? Is it really?
I don't know.
Yeah. I think the appearance is more of what we're after, so.
And my only comment on that is, as you're driving by, you're really not going to notice whether it's stone or metal, and if it's metal, it can be brushed metal, which takes the patina off and adds some character to it. So, yeah.
Okay. No one made any comments about the size of the sign relative to the others. Any issues there? Okay, so no real issues there. Town logo, do we want to pass along any comments there, or just, or not?
I like it. I mean, I think and I agree, it's just because it's an interest to the town, it's not a bad thing.
Okay.
Now, so I could go either way, I don't care that much.
Okay. I've been outvoted there. It's fine. Orientation of the column, any concerns there?
Would have been nice to be consistent, but
It's far enough.
I think it's more visible this way.
It's so far away from the other two.
Really, nobody's going to look at it that.
We're the only ones who will ever know it from now to the end of time.
Okay.
It's more visible this way.
Okay. All right, I think we've got our list. We got our list?
The first one was issue about the finish of the cap and the base, that either they go with sandstone or that they come back with a finish that looks like sandstone. That they consider lighting through a solar application rather than hardware.
Can I correct that first one? Can we can we just leave that to staff, let staff approve that, they need to come back? I agree. Yeah, that first item is a comment, and staff can make the decision from there, is that reasonable?
Well, this will be in front of the board, so we'll see what they think as well.
Okay.
And then, in terms of the landscaping, that it's trying to make sure the park department works to make sure there's low water use type plants, and that, I don't know if the Rios line is there. I know the Rios line is in 76th Street because it goes to their project, but it doesn't go all the way, I don't think, to the corner. So I don't know if we have the ability to do reuse water there. So then I think we take a little harder look at the low water use type of landscaping that's there.
And then the lone shrub, just ensuring we don't put any type of shrubbery that's going to grow on the north side of that sign.
Yeah. Okay, and then, so that was an additional one. I had that one, Bob.
Okay.
And then, it's okay to use both of the panels for the time being. The understanding is that Guardian Storage can have a tenant on the second panel and then redo their upper panel for their sign if that happens in the future. Okay? That's all I have.
Then the termination, changing of the agreement to termination reverts to the sign, reverts to the town. We're going to have a giant welcome to Superior sign.
Flashing lights.
Okay, do we have a motion to?
Yeah, I have another.
Oh, sorry.
What about the stop line on 76th Street?
Oh, yeah,
What
thank
has to be
you
a
for that.
condition to fix that?
Do we need to make that a condition, or Alex, can we just put that on your list of to-dos? Is that,
Yeah, it's kind of.
are we okay with that, or? Do we want to, we could make it conditional, because, I mean, if it's there, they truly stop there, you could very well get blocked, but.
Well, it's kind of out of Guardian's hands.
Yeah.
That's our,
Public Works.
Okay. All right.
Okay, anything further? Okay, motion by Commissioner Cole. State the motion.
Okay. All right, want to make a motion, resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior recommending approval of a special use permit regarding a monument sign for Guardian Storage in case number SUP-2013-1. This is resolution PC-4. Okay. With the following conditions, one, an applicant shall make minor technical and red line corrections to plans as identified by town staff, and that the items we discussed previously, which is viewing the finish of the cap and base to assure it's as consistent as can be with the existing signage, that we would change the verbiage, I don't know the section number, but to allow the town to take ownership of the sign at the end of the special use permit. That solar be considered as an option for power, that we ensure that there's low shrubbery on the north side that can't grow to cause visibility issues. That we look at low water use type vegetation and landscape around the sign. Is that the same thing?
2 panels.
No, and yeah, no, we changed the license, or the special use permit to allow Guardian Storage to utilize the 2 panels as they see fit.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner McCool, second by Commissioner Eaton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimous. Okay. Next item on the agenda is item number 6, public hearing and adoption of resolutions approving the final plat, replat, filing 1, case number SUB-FP-2013-1, and final development plan, phase 1, case number FDP 2013-1 for Superior Town Center streets and utilities. Public hearing is now open. We have proof of publication for the public hearing. Proof of publication confirmed. We have a presentation from the applicant.
Yes. Good evening, Randy Goodson with the applicant. Thank you again for having me, and for all your time to review the application, and your time tonight. I have full-size sets of the application with you. When something comes up, we'll get to review them. And also in front of you, we have some visual aids, real materials. We'll talk a little bit about that later. What we're bringing to you is the first phase of Superior Town Center. There's a replat that's part of the application, and it's a replat because Superior Town Center was previously platted, and we had to submit a replat to make it consistent with the approved plan development amendment. And I'll show you in the replat. In the replat, we really just identified the areas that are part of the first phase FDP, first and second phase FDP, and all the rest of the area. So we will be walking through the application and various components of the application. Sometimes these presentations end up being online, and we'll put them on our own website, so we really have more of an outline or a table of contents to facilitate other subsequent views of the presentation. Again, there's no buildings involved. We've had a lot of discussions about all the applications where there's no buildings involved. We are really eager to get to the building stage. This is identified as FDP number 1, FDP phase 1, number 1, because BVI and Cornerstone will be coming in with an FDP within the next 2 weeks. So if not your next planning commission hearing, the one after that, you'll be looking at an FDP phase 1, number 2, that'll have the buildings fronting Recreation Road. And that's the road that Main Street comes in. This here is Main Street. McCaslin's over here, 36 is over here. Main Street comes in, and this street over here that fronts all the recreational activities and connects the Cold Creek area to the park in our project we've identified as Recreation Road. So this is focusing on roadways, on-street parking, and utilities. It's our first opportunity to start with establishing the character and promoting the quality and unique attributes of the Superior Town Center. Some of the some of the pavers here, and then we have natural stone and other accents that we'd like to talk to you about.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question before you finish? Did you open the public hearing on the final plat? Because my impression is that the final plat was to be done first, and then the FDP phase 1. So Fred, do you have any?
I would suggest, I can't remember.
Together is okay.
Combining, I think together is okay, as long as when you get to the end, that you make a separate resolution for the plat and a separate resolution for the FDP.
Okay. I did gavel them both, though. I handled them both at once, so if that's okay, we'll continue. Okay, thanks.
I did not hear that when you did it. I was looking elsewhere. Thank you.
Here is the approved plan development amendment, land use concept plan. And in the dashed area here are the components that are part of the permanent improvements that are part of the FDP phase 1, number 1. There are other temporary improvements that I'll talk about that provide temporary parking and temporary access over in the location I just highlighted. And then the area in purple is the area that will be coming in on FDP phase 1, number 2, following in the next couple of weeks. This is just showing that this FDP1 is consistent. This is an exhibit from the PD amendment that was approved. The board had asked for exhibits to identify the conceptual phases. Our vision was the best on FDP1, number 1, and so this is the sheet identified as Project Implementation Sheet 2.1, PI 2.1 at the back of the approved PD amendment, and just there showing you that this area is indeed consistent with the first FDP that you have before you tonight. This is the replat, identified the blocks in blue and green are the blocks that are being platted, and the rest of the property is in a larger plat. These are the only blocks that are platted. All the rest is just it's a platted, non-platted block. Is there a better way to describe that?
Super blocks.
Super blocks. Super lots.
Yeah.
Super lots. And again,
Randy, technically, it's platted. A super block or a large area like that is not defined by other sublots or whatever. It is platted as itself. And you'll replat it later.
I agree.
What he said.
What he said. As you can see here, we dedicate the right-of-way for Phase 1 FDP number 1 and several of the other streets. We dedicate some detention ponds, and I guess at the bottom here, we reserve super lots for the future replat. The area right, this is the BVI cornerstone and parking and the detention pond, and Main Street comes right down here. This is Recreation Road that connects the park here to the park area and trail area here, and of course goes in front of the fabulous recreation facility coming forward. At this point, I'll introduce somebody who spoke briefly a moment ago, Jim Brostowicz, and apparently he might be the only engineer working in this town. Jim Brostowicz.
Jim Brostowicz again, 323 5th Street, Frederick. So this is Main Street, as everybody knows. This is Main Street here. We're building the internal roundabout as part of this first FDP. We have not designed the roundabout on McCaslin. That'll be the next FDP that you see from Ranch Capital, which will include this roundabout and some other things. So this roundabout, the bulk of Main Street here, we've got a couple different types of roads, which I'll talk about later. This is Recreation, is it Drive or Avenue? Recreation Avenue along Block 12, this will be Cornerstone and Boulder Valley Ice and a parking lot, which you'll see in the next FDP. We do have a building on this. It's a small lift station building, which I'll talk about a little bit more. We have, as part of this FDP, we also have a couple of temporary things that we'll talk about. This here is a surface parking lot. It would be made out of recycled asphalt. Right now, it's laid out for 80 cars, and what we did is we talked to BVI and Cornerstone about what their anticipated parking needs are based on the approved parking ratios in the PD amendment, and we think they're going to need about 80 more spots to support their use when they come in here. So that's what this is. Over here, this is a staging area for construction.
In addition to being on site.
Yes, and we do have, yes, we have 100 on-street parking spaces in this FDP. Plus 6 accessible on-street parking, so 106 total on-street. So what they put in, plus what we figure is either fronting them or 1 block away, whatever we don't meet with those 2 uses will be met in this temporary parking lot right here. All of this is in the floodplain, which we can't do any major fills in right now, so we pushed all this stuff up into the floodplain. Parking isn't allowed use in the floodplain. This here is a temporary/emergency access road. It'll be improved right here at the intersection. Go to the next one. A little context right here. This is Main Street. The roundabout is going to be in here, and all this will be redone as part of the next FDP. This is that temporary access road that I just showed you. So the Coal Creek Bridge is right off the print right here. So we're actually going to put a permanent apron in there because this is going to be in place for a while. We don't want to track up McCaslin for the next 3 years while we're building this. This is intended for construction traffic and emergency vehicle access. And until we get the roundabout in, we're going to cut the median out and put in a temporary left turn lane and a temporary piece of asphalt roadway between the permanent roundabout and McCaslin. It may actually be that, depending on how we phase this project in the following FDPs, this might not actually be put in, and that temporary use might actually come over here. But we want to show that this is possible to do in our kind of our worst-case scenario in case something was delayed. A little more detail on the temporary parking lot. People will have to walk up a slope. The reason that this is so long is because this temporary parking lot is about 10 feet lower than the street because we can't fill for the floodplain. Drainage. What we've proposed is all consistent with the previous drainage studies that we've done. We're putting in this one pond here. It's called 312. It's right behind Boulder Valley, where it's going to go. Putting in a couple of main trunk storm sewers to get all the drainage in this red outlined area into this pond. This pond is sized to handle full build-out of everything in this red area. It's also, it's been designed to interface with the future ponds that will need to be put in south and north of them, but it also stands alone, so it's not relying on anything else that has yet to be built to make it work correctly. We're building an outfall channel up to Coal Creek, which is up here. And we'll talk a little bit more about this pond in some future slides because there's some walls around it. Utilities. Here's the lift station, the existing lift station up here behind Old Chicago. We're going to interconnect that lift station with the new lift station. That will pump sewage around the bottom of the cemetery to where it goes now by the cemetery. We're bringing in 2 water lines, one off each, there's 2 mains in McCaslin, so we're looping a 12-inch water line through here to make sure these guys get fire flow right away. We're bringing in the reuse water line along what's going to be called Old Railway up to Recreation Drive, and although landscaping in the detention area and the landscaping along Main Street will be fed off that reuse water line. I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Good evening, Paul Kewen, MIG Winston, 4696 Broadway. And we're going to be addressing the streetscape and landscape improvements associated with the Phase 1 FDP. And that's primarily associated with the 3 blocks of Main Street and the 2 kind of north-south tending blocks of Recreation Avenue. And as clarification, the Phase 1 FDP addresses the west side of Recreation Avenue. The east side of Recreation Avenue, as far as streetscaping and landscaping, would be part of the BVI FDP. And we're really going for, a timeless look here, something that looks like it's been on the ground for 50 years, 20 years. Looking for honest materials, relying a lot on concrete unit pavers because of their durability, the ability to pull them up to make repairs and put them back down and make them still look as good as the day they were installed. We're going to be looking at diversity of patterns and materials and textures to create a visual interest on the walking surfaces and pedestrian areas and gathering spaces. And also changes in colors to create that visual interest. We're going to focus on green design. We'll show this in a bit, but there are areas of porous paving where the entire paved surface is created, basically a drainage area is created by a deep layer of graduated crushed rock, and then pavers that have larger gaps.
These pavers here in the middle, I'm pointing to the Eco-Venetian paver.
Correct.
If you speak, I'll point. It's this paver here. It's the wrong color.
Wrong color. Yeah. We're a little dependent on what they have in stock for these things, but you do have the color samples within the materials that were submitted. These have a little larger joint than the standard paver and a little coarser aggregate between that allows water to flow directly down into the crushed rock below, gets filtered in the process, and then moved out into the drainage system. We're going to focus on locally produced materials where possible, or regionally produced, try and avoid certainly things imported from out of the country. And the landscape will have a dense shade tree canopy, and we'll be looking for a water-wise landscape. I don't want to go to a xeriscape. This is an urban area, and there would be adapted plants that we think would be appropriate for this Main Street and Recreation Avenue location. And but there will be consideration given to that, and certainly within the irrigation system as far as controls and emitters and things like that. And here's some examples of some of the materials we're proposing. You can see we're looking at more than your average tree grade, something that has some nice textures to it, a leaf pattern in this case, inserts on the corners to identify street intersections. And the tree grade here is that we're showing here is a 4x8, and that's included in all of the tree grade shown on the plans, and that gives the plants a much larger growing media to work in and much better air exchange, so a healthier tree canopy results from that. Once again, with more focus directly on Main Street, we have the main roundabout, the interior roundabout that Jim mentioned. The center of that would be landscaped with very large evergreen trees. You'll notice that we're calling for 16-foot spruce trees, 12, 15-footers, make an instant impact, things that could be decorated for seasonal lighting, really create that grand entry for the people coming into the town center on Main Street, landscaping on either side in the medians, where visibility restrictions allow it. We have to obviously stay within the safety requirements for that. You can see the canopy of trees on either side. These darker areas denote the Eco-Venetian porous paving areas, and that's all in the angle parking areas. So the sidewalks are slanted to slope into those areas, and there also would be drain inlets in locations on the corners to accommodate major storm flows, but most of your typical flows, your nuisance flows, melting snow, things like that, would immediately go down into that porous paving system. The sidewalks themselves would be a mixture of concrete unit pavers and some natural sandstone. We'll talk a little bit about maybe increasing the amount of natural sandstone within the project, and so that is associated with the blocks on either side of the future town square block, concrete paving within the roadway for Main Street on the first block, and on the third block. The town square block would have a concrete unit paver treatment of Holland stone, a classic 4x8 stone, and the purpose for that, right, and that's over here. The second set of stones on the, thanks Randy, the Holland stone, and the purpose for that is to really identify this as a festival area, something that can be closed off, turned into a farmer's market, and so you have a very rich palette of materials through here in a really unique space that's identified by that change in materials. Each one of the intersections along Main Street is a speed table crossing where the walking surface is raised up to the pedestrian level, and so the cars go up a ramp and then back down a very gentle ramp. And so that's another feature of this that facilitates pedestrian movement and safe pedestrian crossing and alerts the vehicles to the fact that they're in a pedestrian zone. We have the angle parking. Those spaces are going to be denoted by white color, limestone color unit pavers that would be associated with the Eco-Venetian pavers. Similar to that color like that. So there'll be a permanent denotation of the parking spaces. We'll also have a strong framework of site furnishings and amenities that we'll show you in a little bit, and seating and gathering opportunities throughout the streetscape. These are vignettes of what some of the corners might look like, and you start to get an idea of the various materials. This indicates the concrete paving that's on the first and third blocks, and this is the Eco Venetian permeable paving system in the angle parking areas, the 4x8 tree grades, the ideas of bike racks and benches, and then wide sidewalks that are 14 feet wide at their narrowest, so, and they get wider from there. Opportunities for landscaping and seating areas. In this case, we're showing concrete seat walls, curves concrete seat walls that would be sandstone with red sandstone with buff sandstone caps, decorative boulders, rich landscaping, and this is where you can start to see the ramp up for the tabletop crossing with concrete unit pavers denoting the crosswalks, contrasting colors, and of course we've got the truncated domes identifying each one of those crossing points. We'll talk about, at some point Dan will talk about custom light poles and these were placeholders. For now, we've got some other designs that we'll be showing you later in the presentation as something that could be considered as a condition of approval for this FDP. So this is one corner prototype on the town square block area. This is where you start to see the Holland stone pavers in the street area, the roadway area. Once again, the permeable pavers, landscaping in the corners and your street tree canopy, and the idea of introducing built elements such as a steel trellis that could have a curve to it and provide a place for a bench to sit under. This is the north block on Main Street along the future town square area, and this is where you'd start to see the larger stones on the right side of the table, your left, I guess it would be, and those are the Verona pavers. They're a little smoother, a change in texture. We can get larger units, 18 by 18, so that creates a more distinctive pattern adjacent to the town square, and then of course the landscaping and shrub beds associated with that. And once again, the festival area paving on the travel lanes for the street. And yeah, go ahead.
On the town square, we don't have a conflict with on-street parking. That's the only place where we don't have the on-street parking. So we've looked at, in the town square, along Main Street, looked at opportunities for landscape islands and landscape areas just to break up the hardscape with these big wide sidewalks. And we're studying some of those options of having perhaps our parking spaces are 8 feet wide, so perhaps having a 22-foot wide landscape area adjacent to the curb that would, with a couple of crossings, a couple of stepping stones so people could walk through them. And we haven't shown those, but we showed this here because this is the one area fronting the town square where, of course, there's no on-street parking. And so we wanted to show that and get your input on how you just consider whether it's all a paved surface with amenities, benches and bike racks and things like that, because of course there's a tension which is healthy and a lot of, if you think of any urban area, there's always a tension, there's always sort of a grit to, it's a little bit of a challenge of some kind. It's an interesting concept when you think about creating some sort of conflict. But the conflict is the more landscaped areas you have, then you take away areas where you might put bikes or benches. So we'd love to get your feedback on that. And then as it relates to the Verona stone, the stone on the right here that's sort of covered up with that sign, I won't leave the mic. We identified the Verona stone because of its large size and smooth texture. And candidly, when we saw the Verona stone, we decided, when we saw it in a large field, we initially saw it like you're seeing it here, and then us and some of your town staff, including Alex, went to the yard and saw big areas of these stones laid out. We realized that we didn't really weren't as enthralled with this Verona stone for big areas as we were looking at the pictures, the marketing materials. And so in our FDP, we've shown the Verona stone all around the town square, and I'll turn the mic back over to Paul in a moment. We've done a lot of touring and researching and trying to find what else we like better for the special area. The Verona stone is intended to be that flat area that subconsciously kind of draws you to walk around the town square. And so an option that we would consider as a condition of approval, or however we're able to engage in this discussion with you, is to have a natural stone that it actually is a stone common to the area. It's a stone right up front. It's your entry into your town hall. It's a really rich stone. It comes in an even bigger paver. We don't want, the bigger the paver, the less impact on heels. It doesn't affect everyone, but affects half our population. And here's a rendering that we sort of put together. This perspective obscures the fact that this is a 14-foot or 13-foot sidewalk and 9 feet from the tree grate to the edge of the building here. So from here to here, that's 9 feet, right, Paul?
Yes.
So it obscures that, but the idea is to introduce, or we're looking at introducing a larger natural stone, and with that, let me turn it over to Paul. I just wanted to introduce that.
And we would see picking up on this type of pattern here, where you vary the size pavers. We'd make sure we maintain the proper joint size between, and it would be set on concrete so it would be durable. You could drive maintenance vehicles on it. And sandstone is actually, the native sandstone, the Lion sandstone, is actually harder as far as density than concrete, cast concrete pavers, which have a very high density as compared to cast in place concrete. So very durable material. The pavers, there have been sandstone sidewalks used in Denver for hundreds of years. So, and obviously very rich, very natural, and native to the area. So we think it would be a really great enhancement to the streetscape. And this shows the idea. Obviously, there's a grade change here, but it shows the idea of the connections through a planter, if that's an idea that would be open to discussion. Here's an example of the curved sandstone walls. Once again, the Lion's red sandstone with buff sandstone on top. And these are you'll notice not all of the corners are identical. Some of them have two curved sandstone walls. In some cases, we have benches that provide the landscape or the amenity zone. And so there's some variety built into the plan. This is just kind of one of the prototypical conditions. This, by the way, this does show the Venetian pavers. The pavers immediately on your right, on the far end of the table here. And once again, varying sizes, a nice texture that provides visual interest. Those are a little scuffed up because of the shipment process. That does wear off with time. And we see those as kind of an accent paver on the corners. That would be combined with either the Verona stone or the sandstone. Recreation Avenue would go. It's kind of the next tier in the streetscape treatment. It's obviously the sidewalks are a little more narrow than some of the areas on Main Street, but we are still using the concrete unit pavers, the street trees and tree grates, and it's still a very high level of finish. You do see asphalt parking. And once again, this is turned a little bit with Recreation Avenue running across the bottom of the sheet instead of vertical in previous views. And this would be the streetscape associated with BVI Cornerstone. This does show the raised tabletop crossing at that intersection with wider than normal crosswalks, so people with hockey bags can easily walk back and forth. and safely walk to the ice arena. From a landscape standpoint, we're going to go with a diverse palette. We're firm believers in, as much as I love symmetry within street tree plantings, we're in line with city foresters who advocate no more than 15% of any one species. So you're going to see a variety of trees throughout. The trees are selected from the design guidelines that were worked in the PD amendment plan and developed in conjunction with staff, and also the recommended guidelines from current street tree studies being done throughout Colorado. Good durable trees for this setting. We have not used any ash trees because of ash borer being found in the area. And obviously form, texture, and seasonal color have all gone into the selections. And so you can start seeing you're getting a very roundabout area is a great example of a nice rich landscape gateway that you'd have coming into the town center. The detention pond is a more naturalized setting, a little yellowish green, but that indicates the native landscape, the native grasses, and so we do propose trees within the bottom of the pond to help mitigate the wall, either multi-stem trees or single-stem trees. We do have walls on the west side of the pond and on the east side of the pond, and we'll, if Jim wants to, if you have more detail, Jim, or need more details, Jim can provide those. We are proposing shrub plantings across the top of the wall to provide additional screening, and there would be a chain link, a black vinyl-coated chain link fence on the top of the wall for safety purposes. The red line is not an X. These are section lines that we'll show you in a second. So we have a section that comes across the pond through here, viewing, and we'll show a view from 36, and in a section that runs east-west across the pond that you'll see in the next slide. And once again, same idea as far as planting design. And the purpose of this slide is to show the fact that the first section here taken from this view across the pond, as you're running southbound on 36, viewing just south of the future ice arena, which would be in this location. You really don't get any views of the pond bottom or the walls because the landform on the east side of the pond obscures that along with the vegetation on top of the pond edge. This shows the idea of the trees screening the wall. And the next view, which is the east-west view, shows that as 36 comes up, you do start to see a little bit more into the pond bottom, but because of the landform and the shrub edge and the mitigation of the trees in front of the wall, that the wall should be, impact should be reduced. And you're driving 65 miles an hour, yes. And for most drivers, their vision is ahead, so once you're actually parallel to the pond where you start seeing the most of it, you really aren't aware of it. The view is blocked for the average driver. Jim, do you want to talk about radio station?
So this is our one building. This is the lift station that will be located north of the Cornerstone Medical Office. There is a sample board here. Which shows some of the materials. So the purpose of the lift station basically is to house the mechanical equipment that's required to pump all the sewage over the hill to the treatment plant. Interior to the lift station, there's a very deep pit with 3 pumps in it. Inside the station, there's a bunch of electrical gear, climate controlled. Well, we've worked with the lift station design consultant, which actually the town has engaged that consultant to design this, to make sure that we have a overhead door here that's required. You can see the scale of a pickup truck to back in and pull one of these pumps out. That is not going to be facing the street. That's facing north, so it's going to face a future detention pond. This is the street elevation. It's actually mislabeled. This is actually the west elevation. This faces Recreation Drive, or Recreation Avenue. We have in the back, this will be facing, this is the 36 side. We have some electrical gear and, heating, ventilation, air conditioning gear inside of a screen wall, so you won't see that from the street. You really won't see it from anywhere except from the sky. Here's a rear elevation. Again, it's all screened. There is a variety of materials in this elevation to try to give it, consistency with the architectural standards and the design guidelines. We have some tinted glass here. We've got a couple of different types of colors of, the board's disappeared, you've got them. So this is our first building.
This slide illustrates some of the other materials, kind of your classic street bench, that black powder-coated metal with arms to aid the elderly in getting up off the bench, so comfortable and durable. Trash receptacles that would be in the same family. The bike rack, this one is shown in a polished aluminum or metal finish. We would see that as a black powder-coated finish. We're still looking at other options for that, and if we find one that we like better than this one. But the idea is to have something that's distinctive, that can accommodate a number of bikes along Main Street, and make sure that we have alternate modes accommodated comfortably along the street. Once again, the tree grate, the 4x8 tree grate that we talked about earlier, the various pavers, and they're all keyed within your packages, so you can identify each paver in each location. The truncated dome pavers. This is the elevation of the blocks for the retaining walls that would be part of the detention pond. The idea is that we would have two different colors. The thinking is that the lower end of the lower portion of the wall would be the darker color, and as you go up, it gets lighter, so it settles it on the ground plane. And obviously, this is more of a vertical application here, so it'd be wouldn't quite get the mountain views out of there that you see in this image. This starts to show the idea of custom light poles rather than a standard light pole. The idea is to create a structurally sound light pole that can accommodate banners, that can accommodate Tivoli lighting, hanging baskets, something that's, that would be substantial. And I do apologize, some of these colors shift a little bit. That's actually supposed to be rose color sandstone. It's one of the most difficult colors to get out of color pencil. You just can't match it because it's a natural color. But the idea of using, tube steel, various, and a couple different options for discussion purposes. They're kind of more modern feel with tube steel bundle that comes up to a central one that would go to an arm with the LED light, the Tivoli lighting across the top, attachment points for banners, hanging baskets, sandstone base, buff sandstone cap on it with some nice detailing, perhaps the logo for the town center incorporated into that element. Second option is a little more traditional, a little more historic looking. Once again, sandstone panels on the insert, some fabricated steel framework around the outside, a tapered steel pole with perhaps a different type of light head on top of that. But once again, all that structural soundness that it's amazing once you start Tivoli lights on a light pole, they really want to tip in, so those have to be pretty stout, well-engineered units. So, but that really starts to set this character for the core area. And so we'd appreciate your feedback on that if that's a direction you'd like us to pursue. Anything else? And we'll have Greg Adams from Plant and Lighting address the lighting.
Good evening, Greg Adams, Clanton & Associates, 4699 Nautilus Court South in Boulder. My role on the team for this project is the lighting consultant. The focus of the work I will be doing is street lighting and roadway lighting for Phase 1. The primary vision or primary goal of the lighting design for this project for us is really to support vision. After the sun goes down, how are we able to see where it is we need to go? The way we have evolved our roadway and exterior lighting designs is by emphasizing a reduction of glare and using sources that are excellent, that have excellent color rendering properties, color rendering characteristics, meaning the reds look red, the yellows look yellow, the greens look green. We've just seen numerous slides of Paul's that show us an incredible palette of patterns, textures, and colors, and I think that we are going to do a great job in lighting it so that it presents as well at night as it does during the day. Not to get too deep into the technical weeds, but we are going to start with LED sources. LED solid-state lighting technology has finally evolved in most recent years to a place where it's appropriate outdoor in general lighting applications. It's no longer reserved to exit signs and traffic signals. The warm, we'll be using a warm white source, 3,000 Kelvin. We will vary the wattage or vary the output of the luminaires used along the roadways versus the roundabout, and we will be proposing an 18-foot mounting height for the luminaires. These are just a couple of representative pictures that indicate, this more traditional style. Here's something that starts to take a more classic shape, puts a little more modern twist to it. But with LEDs now and the way the technology is evolving, we can get into some even much more contemporary forms if it goes that way. This is just a typical planned clip of the proposed layout. These are showing up anywhere from, say, 85 to 95 feet on center. At an 18-foot mounting height gives us an appropriate light level along the roadway and the parking areas as well. This is one of the benefits, I think, of LED technology, is that the optical characteristics of the luminaires that are being produced today afford us the opportunity to stretch them pretty far apart at relatively low mounting heights, which reduces the amount of street clutter from the hardware. This is the existing roundabout at McCaslin and Colton that shows the lighting equipment that's out there today. This kind of equipment really isn't, I don't think, appropriate for the town center sort of environment. But what I wanted to be able to show you is that the locations of the equipment that are shown, or that are down at this roundabout, will be very similar to what we're doing in the town center. We'll be lighting ahead of the crosswalk as you exit the roundabout or as you enter the roundabout, and then we'll be we'll be doing a very good job of getting the travel lane as well illuminated as possible. There will need to be a couple of poles at the north and south legs installed as future development comes online to make this roundabout lighting system work as a cohesive whole. One of the challenges to this particular roundabout, to me, from the lighting design standpoint, is the skew. So it gives us a couple extra poles in the layout. Couldn't be avoided. And that's just the numeric summary, the performance data of the system. The last piece is just sort of a miscellaneous electrical item. Each of the trees is being proposed to have a tree grate receptacle for available power. Festival lighting, and so on. That's all I got. Thanks.
And along with the festival lighting, we'll also have drainage locations in the tree grates, so that if we have events where we have food tents or food trucks, that we can hook up there, instead of just dumping ice or putting water on the streets, which you see a lot. Well, we'll have drains that they can connect up to, so that doesn't happen. And then, of course, if they're located in the on-street parking areas that are permeable, those are all drains. So with that, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'm sure there'll be questions. We're here to answer your questions as much as we can.
Okay, thank you. Questions of the applicant from commissioners? Who wants to start? Commissioner Rittmeister.
So
it looks to me like we're getting a little paper crazy, and I know that some of that is coming from the design concept document or something like that. But, and I know you've done a lot to explore these different materials, and maybe this will be more around discussion. But I think that in some ways, the walking areas are going to have too much texture. And Randy, you brought up high heels, and not that I wear them, but if I look at the areas where we want people to be able to easily pass, be it a mom in a stroller, or a person in a wheelchair, or a vendor with their cart trying to get to places, I just, at the same time that it brings a really rich feel, I think that in a practical sense, it can be difficult to work with. I also want to know then, from a more technical point of view, the freeze-thaw behaviors and characteristics when we start to get into all these pavers. I know that when you go to Interlochen and when you go to Flatirons, most of those areas where they tried to do these accent pavers have been somewhat disastrous, and over time they've been pulled. And so when I look at an extensive area where you're going to have combinations of sunshine but shadow zones, how do you shovel it, and things like that, I'm just wondering if our design guidelines, if we've gone a little too far in what we're looking for, because I think there can be some real challenges to the maintenance and usability when it's that extensive.
Thank you for your comments. We share your concerns. All of the things that you mentioned are things that we've discussed and evaluated, particularly as it relates to just too much of the paver. And that's why we had to go around and look at a lot of places where the pavers take up large areas. Something that comes to mind locally is the Westminster Promenade. The pavers are everywhere, and what you'll see there next time you go there, you'll probably focus on it more, but the paver sizes are all really small. The biggest pavers are really 12 by 12, and their way of breaking it up looked really good plan view, which is looking down at the plan where they had all these 8 by 8 foot squares and just changed the colors and things like that. And so the pavers that we've identified, that we have a lot more variation, and we also have bigger size pavers. And then when we were looking for the larger pavers that we've shown on the right here, the Verona pavers, I didn't even hand out those brochures. The brochures looked great, but in a large setting, it just, to me, looks like scored concrete. And so that's where we started looking for something else, and that's where we came up with these two images. If I could just finish up just real briefly. So you can keep talking about where the pavers go and whether there's too much pavers or where we should put different types of materials to address the issue with durability and the freeze thaw, and whether there's expansive soils or if you have movement in the soils. For freeze thaw, for all the durability of these pavers is much higher than concrete. And when you have a chance, if you look at the edge of the pavers, they're all, there's a beveled edge to them, and these pavers are all throughout Colorado, in mountain towns where there's a lot more snow than you get here. Your staff has come to meet with one major supplier that we've been working with and asked them a bunch of the technical questions. And my understanding is, and you might want to ask your staff, Alex is here, I'll let him address that. And then as it relates to the subsurface, we are, in a lot of places, pavers are used, and where money is saved is it's just put over a gravel, effectively road base. And what we're doing is we have a sub-base that's concrete, but then with gravel above that, our drainage system, where it's permeable and where it's not permeable, there's no drainage system. But so we'll have a concrete sub-base, and then we'll have the aggregate, the gravel, if you will, and then the pavers. And then if we need to penetrate the paving at all, rather than if we had a concrete street and you have to cut it up and you never really match it, it never looks the same, here we'd be able to pull up the pavers, use a gigantic vacuum to suck out all the gravel, cut the concrete, do whatever we have to do, and then rebuild it. And so that's happened all throughout. So that's how we've considered dealing with those questions. And can I turn it over to your staff for a moment to talk about?
Can I just ask one question? What bothers me about this is the seams
Right.
between the pavers.
The materials are very strong, sandstone's very strong.
Right.
It's what
But the
happens in
seaming of
between.
this makes it very uneven.
And this is exactly to your point. And the seaming, so
I know that's right.
I'm glad you brought that up. There's a lot to talk about. Our goal is to, both with the building architecture and with the tenants that where we locate certain tenants in a retail environment, a lot of research and thought goes into the tenancy, the makeup of the tenants, where they're located, what does their facade look like, and the interest of a pedestrian walking by, what draws their interest. In addition, subconsciously, it's not to create subconscious barriers, whether it's uncomfortable to walk on, or whether you might break a heel, or maybe just not comfortable to walk on, like the pavers that we like for the texture on the far end. Those go into certain areas where we want that visual texture, but you would walk on it for a very, very short period of time. And we want to draw people around the town square. And so I'm just going to go up here to the exhibit where I can show you so the flat pavers, I think it's a 5-foot section, would be along Main Street here, and then would go around the town square like that, so that it would draw people into the places where we want them to walk. And it would be limited to that area that I highlighted. There might be a band that would meander down here along the promenade, and that would be a 5-foot walkway that would have no seams. We are looking at the natural material because we want the bigger paver, we want the durability, we want the texture, and so that's, if you think about that, just to explain that a little bit more.
I mean, I think that it's important to have the beauty of it, to be aesthetically appealing. But it also, and from my own personal experiences, I know how difficult it can be when all of this is uneven. And like I said, and the seams, you try to walk in a way that you're not paying attention, but you really have to pay attention. I worked at Flatirons. I think it's a nightmare. The whole thing is built in such a way that it's built with pavers that are so uneven. So, I just think that it's a very important point to be made.
It really is, and we appreciate it. And even Flatirons has much smaller pavers than we're using. The bigger the paver, the more expensive they are, and the more expensive they are to install, because the weight, this paver here is almost 90 pounds for the large paver in this format, and over here it's that paver is 50 pounds, and so it really matters when you get to the cost of installation, and that's where, again, but where it's important, it matters to us, to all of us. Also, and that's where we have the 5-foot walkway in the areas that will be zero seam and whatnot. I want to point out, so that it's clear to everyone, the eco paver, the permeable paver that is in the on-street parking, that's the only place the permeable paver is located, and you have an option. because you don't have to park in the on-street parking. There's going to be structured parking throughout the project, and so if people did not want to walk 5 feet, 6, 10 feet, whatever, from their car to the sidewalk, you would be able to say, I'm just going to go park in a structure and stay on flatter surfaces. And having said that, you might step up and take a look. These pavers are not randomly spaced. I'm just going to walk over there and grab a paver and I'll come back. These permeable pavers, if you see the ridges on the edge, so the spacing that you see there is the spacing that will exist, and these ridges are important to make sure that they have that constant porosity or the drainage.
Otherwise known as wiggle room.
It's actually not a wiggle room. It actually takes away
From the wiggle room, okay.
Yeah, this takes away the wiggle room because you don't have horizontal movement. It locks the pavers in. All these pavers have little ridges that give them a more structural integrity.
Thank you.
Alex Arnold, Public Works Director, and I've had a lot of the same questions and concerns that you've raised, and so what we're doing, we're educating ourselves, we're going to the manufacturers and the people that make these pavers to find out what they recommend in terms of installation, and then we've contacted Public Works directors throughout the region to see what experience they've had with pavers, how they were constructed. We're going to go out and look at them, not only the ones that were just recently constructed, but ones that have been in place for several years, because I'm looking down the road, what am I going to do 5, 10 years from now on maintaining these things? Also, you always end up having to tear up roads, or you have pipes break or whatever. So what happens when these things, when you have to remove them and then put them back? What I do like about the pavers is that when you have to get into the road, under the road, you can pull the pavers out and put the same ones back, so the colors will be matching, versus concrete, where you take out a concrete road, you got to put concrete back, and it never really matches the way you'd like it. We've seen that in some of our paving projects when we rip out some curb and gutter and don't rip out the stuff right next door. We have different colors. So, but I'm concerned about the different materials, and I think over the crosswalks, like over in Flatirons Crossing, you have asphalt, and you have a concrete ribbon, and you have the pavers. So you have 3 different materials, all with different freeze thaws, temperatures and so forth. So they're all moving at different speeds. So we're concerned about that. These are much denser than concrete or asphalt, so they're going to stay in place. And we're going to have special sand and gravel that they're going to be supported on. Of course, the construction methods need to be as recommended by the manufacturer to make sure we get the product we want. So I have all those questions, so we're getting educated to make sure we know how these things go down, and we learn from the experience of our neighboring jurisdictions.
Alex, so if that sublayer, okay, so as I understand, there might be like a concrete layer, then there's going to be some sort of porous gravel layer, and then these come over that. So if that gravel layer gets saturated and then it freezes, then it will be expanding and pushing up on the pavers. Again, where I get concerned then is we can have areas that stay frozen for a long time because you're in a shadow zone and this and that. So how do you engineer it so that if that graveled layer actually is moist, has water in it, and it's going to freeze, it's going to expand, that's physics, and then it starts pushing up on these pavers, and so over time they lose that integrity of whatever is bonding them and keeping them flat. There are just so many breach points, I guess, is the issue that I see with pavers, and I'm just really concerned on this whole ideas of walking and strolling, and these are expensive materials, and I can truly appreciate that, and inexpensive installations. I just really get concerned if they're going to stand the test of time
It's our
with
concern
our
as well.
conditions.
We're going to ask those questions, how do these things move, how do they perform during, freeze-thaw cycles?
Yeah.
And some may have more freeze-thaw cycles than others because they're in shade versus others are in sunlight, so how are they going to perform? So I'll be asking those questions as we go through the process.
Okay.
Alex, one more question. Down in the South Denver area, DTC, they have a lot of plazas now that are failing due to this Bowmanite material, among others, and they've had some history with the very thing that I think we're talking about here next to me. Is there a long-standing history, like a study on some of these products as far as how they're holding up? Are they relatively new products? I know paste don't change stuff all the time.
I imagine they've been around for a number of years, and they are used extensively in the resort towns. Vail, Aspen, Steamboat have a lot of these pavers. And one thing I have to research, maybe they're the ones that they freeze and they stay frozen all winter. They could be. I mean, those are the types of questions I have to ask for those people that have used them, because I know those mountain towns have used them for 30, 40 years. So I'll find out how they hold up and what did they learn during the course of their history, and try to learn from other mistakes before we put them in.
Well, they use a different concept out there. They replace all the thoroughfares constantly up there paving, so that's the hardest thing to get used to in the towns. But you haven't heard this about Bowman or something?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've gotten some reports back from my neighboring jurisdictions, and they have some issues with the pavers, and what I need to find out are the same kind that we're proposing here. I mean, those are the questions I have to ask. I have to go look at them, and then the ones that, when we decide on the particular ones we're going to use, I'll have to go look at those, the ones in place, see what the history is, and make sure we're going to get the product that is long-lasting. I mean, that's my goal, and so is Randy. I mean,
there's some people looking at like that concept we're talking about, where it's a hybrid, where they're actually warping the paving into drainage systems so that they actually get the stuff to wick away out from under the pavement. I've seen those studies already. It's interesting. Okay.
Other questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I've got a couple. There wasn't much discussion about utilities. I know that's kind of discussed in the plan. Didn't see any mention of conduit or fiber or ability to run Comcast and other broadband through the center. How is that being addressed? How's that being addressed?
Yes, actually, we've been meeting with Excel. We just had a meeting last week, and even some of your staff was there. Excel is actively doing the design. We have left them a utility corridor, basically underneath that back 9 feet of the sidewalks on Main Street, between the tree grates and the building line on both sides of the street. We've reserved that for dry utilities, Excel, Comcast. And so Excel will design all their facilities, and Comcast and everybody else follows. They may be in the same trench, but Excel takes the leads on that. That is ongoing. The details of where all of their structures are not on this FDP because we don't have it yet, but we have left room and we're actively talking to them.
Okay, and I guess, being as new as this is and hopefully leading edge as it's going to be, I mean, making sure things like fiber are made available to some of these facilities. I don't know if we want to be a little bit assertive with some dark fiber providers like Level 3 to maybe get that put in while we're doing this. At least I know in other areas have been built where it's not available, it ends up being extremely expensive to get it added later. And even bringing it into buildings, you're looking at, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 installation costs to bring it from the street into buildings. And I don't know if we can be a little proactive and make this, get this done during the design piece, but I'd love to see that be thought through, and not just build this and hope they'll come, but see if we can get them to come while we're building that thing. Sure.
I've made a note of that, we'll make sure we have fiber.
Okay.
It's been our intention to have it, so.
Yeah. Let's see, the temporary access road that you're bringing in, that you're actually putting the entranceway into, is there, I mean, assume trucks are going to be coming in and out of there. Yep, Matt, right? Yeah, exactly. Are there any turn lanes in, or acceleration or deceleration in or out of that? Are they turning right, straight on, do they have to turn straight onto McCaslin, or do they have a little room to decelerate or accelerate coming out of there?
By virtue of just where it is, there's actually extra room on McCaslin there for the third lane that was never put in.
Okay.
You know, eventually we're going to do some reconfiguration and restriping with the roundabout there, but it's conveniently located where there actually is kind of a de facto acceleration lane. The decel lane doesn't meet the criteria for decel, but this is not, you know, a super high volume driveway. So
it's temporary.
It's temporary.
Just trucks coming in and out and people coming flying down the hill at 55 instead of 45 they should.
You think?
Yeah. But that would be good for them to have room to accelerate in. You know, it just kind of occurred to me when you were talking about the Main Street the roundabout and the farmer's market. If you could go to that slide that kind of shows the landscape view of the roundabout, that'll work. So we talked about closing this off, right, so that, or somewhere in here, so that you could do farmer's market type stuff?
It'll be closed off from Marshall Road to Promenade.
Okay, so this is Marshall Road here.
And here's the town square.
Okay.
So Marshall Road would come down like this.
Okay.
And Promenade would terminate at the town square, and then the pedestrian promenade would continue.
Okay, and so you'd close it off here, and potentially here, right?
We would close it off here.
Oh, there, okay.
And here.
In there, okay. The only thing I thought that came to mind, I mean, as much elegance as you're putting into this, you know, having something other than if you were going to come in with orange and white road barriers, boom, you know, on farmer's market day like they do in a lot of places. I mean, thought could be put to how that block off is going to look so that it's equally as attractive as the rest of the
maybe
town center.
A bollard sleeve.
So yeah. So it's just a thought. We're making this all look so nice and pretty.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Let's see. The bike racks, which I think are awesome, and if you're looking at that kind of style, I'm excited. There's something different, and it's neat to see. Another thing to consider, what you see in Boulder, and I don't know if it's going to happen here. There seems to be a lot of discussion around alternative type transportation, and so that would probably lean towards lead to scooters, and there are scooters that I think are 80cc and less, or at least in Boulder, allowed to pull up on the sidewalk and park, and that's a kind of a common practice. I don't know if we're going to be doing electric vehicles or other things like that, but when those bike rack areas are being designed, making sure there's room, you know, for scooters to pull up and have a place to sit, maybe even create a space for them, I don't know, but I would imagine that's going to continue to grow in this area. And in Boulder, I mean, they just pull up and they might block bike parking access, or you had a. Yeah.
I'd love to get feedback and hear the dialogue and thoughts on the tension of bicycle parking and benches versus the planter areas, and just get your thoughts on how you envision and have envisioned.
Yeah, that was one of my feedback items, and I'm sure everybody will have an opinion on this. I kind of like the idea of additional amenities kind of scattered around. What those would be, whether those are landscape areas, whether those are benches. I mean, I even wrote down, you know, in Pearl Street Mall, they have the sprinkler thing that sprays up for the kids in the summertime, but you can also walk through it, you know, when it's turned off. Play structures, even just rocks. I mean, not necessarily designed to be a play structure, but something that kids would likely play on. That's attractive, that sits in the area. I mean, I like that more than.
Yeah, we definitely have planned for those in in and around the town square and the pedestrian promenade, not the areas on Main Street where there'll be stores fronting Main Street.
No, yeah, understood.
But that's a good point. What we're showing you here is the town square block, and this is, and we would definitely have all those different features to make it attractive to as many people as we can.
So the feedback you wanted was?
So we have the tension so this is a bike parking, and the bike parking would predominantly occur in the areas in between the tree grates, the light poles, and planter areas. And so the more planter areas that you have, the less areas you have for the bike parking in the benches, and vice versa. And so we have we're not debating whether there will be bike parking.
How much?
Or even how much there'll be. Okay. Because in our PD, we're required to have, I believe it's 10% of our parking calculation, whatever our parking calculation adds up to be, for each FDP that generates parking, we have to have 10% of the auto parking spaces is spaces available for bike parking.
Okay.
So we will have the bike parking. So then it comes down to where and in what proximity. And are they going to be sort of all along Main Street, which they'll be along Main Street for sure, but the more we introduce the planter, the more we have to push the bike parking further away from Main Street.
Well, what seems important, and one of the things I liked, especially just again thinking about the Pearl Street area, bikers in those areas tend to bike on the streets because the traffic is designed to be slowed down. You've got these pavers and everything, it just makes it more comfortable to be on the street with a bike. So making sure that the racks are somewhere near an entryway up on to near a crosswalk or some other entryway that bikes can come up and not have to jump the curb to get to the bike rack. And I think that's going to be true for scooters as well if they want to come up. So that seems what's probably more important to me from a placement standpoint, is that they're not having to jump a curb to get up off the street, that they have a convenient way to come up onto the sidewalk from the street and get into a bike parking area.
The way the plan is, that we presented it to you, we have just the planting on the block fronting the town square, and then we have the planters on the corners.
Okay.
And right beyond the planters, then we would have the bike parking, benches, trees, bike parking, benches, trees, and that's what's shown in the plan that we've provided to you.
So is this right here an entryway, or is that curbed? I can't see behind this tree. It looks like there's something going on here, but...
That is, there's a curb there.
That is curbed.
Yeah, the curb and gutter. Up here would be a promenade, and down here would be Marshall Road.
It would seem that somehow, there was just an entrance that's not curbed, that's a sloped entrance up.
Sort of mid-block?
Yeah.
Mid-block,
whether that gets combined with a crosswalk somehow, or at least a place where, I'm not sure what the best way is to design that, but...
The way it's going to function is that people will park here and walk across, or they'll just walk across, and sometimes they'll come to the where the amenity zone is, where the trees are here, and they'll just have a little better view. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times when people want to cross, they're going to want to cross mid-block.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I was thinking more for.
But we could put a mid-block curb cut, so that the bike rider could just come on mid-block in the town square.
But if the bike racks are toward, like toward the corner, they'd come up on the ramped corner, right? And you'd have a bike rack.
Even anywhere, because there's nothing, in this whole stretch for them to come up. The entire, I assume maybe up at a corner there might be.
I think by law you have to, at ADA corner ramp, right?
Mid-block probably is less.
Right.
So we need some advice, I think, from your staff. Jim brought up that if we put a mid-block crossing on one side, it might look like it's a crosswalk, and then if there's not a crosswalk on the other side, then we create a problem. But we're happy if there's a way we can put it where we don't violate
Absolutely.
something.
Well, and again, I can't see how far this is and whether there's going to be a curb cut right here at the corner, but...
Block to block is 300 feet.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, it's also mentioned this right here, this view here is actually a bike lane. This cross-section here, as shown on the PD, this is a 5 or 7 foot bike lane, I forget it. The travel.
Oh, in here?
So even if a bicyclist stopped and dismounted, he's not going to be blocking traffic.
Sure, okay.
Of cars.
Okay.
So Randy, was your question, is that landscape strip appropriate there versus no landscape strip? So
That's right.
that
Or more landscape strips and put the bike, let the bike racks go farther away.
to me, if you're going to have a farmer's market or something in that street and divide it with a landscape strip, it seems to me that it'll get trampled or get in the way potentially of activity in the street moving into the town square and vice versa. To me, it seems like a dividing point rather than an amenity, but it also provides some variation, so it's kind of a tough one.
It's a variation of like the old tree island effect.
Right.
Yeah.
Is what you got.
Yeah, and our sense is that we probably miss, it is a tough one, because it's really hard to anticipate how people use a built environment. If we build it this way first, and it gets trampled and trampled and trampled, then it's easy enough to just convert it and put the pavers over it. If we start with the pavers, it's really hard to go back. It's a lot more intensive to go back and try to say, well, we need, maybe the trees, it's just something's not right, let's add more trees. So our thought was to start off with putting it in the way we proposed it and see how it works, and if it doesn't work, we'll fix it.
Or even some low planters in a sense of planter boxes and things like that, rather than trampled right on the street. You could kind of build them up. I love the idea of foliage and plants and things like that, to break it up and to add some beauty to all of the concrete or plant, So, I don't know, I like your corners. I think your corners are great. And it would be nice to be able to do something like that once or twice in this 300-foot block, so that you...
Yeah, we could do that. We could accommodate planters here with a 30-inch seat wall here as well.
I think that would be pretty cool.
And aren't there some planters where you build like seating around it?
Yeah, well, that's what we started with.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, seating wall, yeah.
No, that's good. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So we'll look at, is that a consistent thought? That's kind of pretty much where we ended up. We didn't put in the seating walls here, but I think that's a good, I support that.
And you could even curve them, just not too wide kind of thing.
And then my, not to go on to totally different, unrelated item.
Sure.
My last comment is just, and it's more a comment, you can respond if you like, but in every development we've had, the dust issues during construction have yet to be satisfactory in anything that I've seen. I mean, and I've watched a good bit of development with Sarah and living over here in Original Town where, the winds here are just so intense. I've seen 2 feet of dirt come off of the park and land in our neighbor's front yard, and, I've watched, just nobody's ever been able to control it. This is a huge development. I'm not sure what considerations are being given to keep that under control over the next 1 to 20 years, but, it's...
During construction?
Yeah, just how to keep the dirt down, how to prevent damage when there's high winds, which we're going to have several times a year.
We'll use best practices, and that's a requirement that we use best practices, and we'll continue to take advice and direction from staff on.
Yeah, I think my comment is I've yet to see it be
better.
successful, so whatever best practices are, either they're not being followed or they don't work, I don't know which, but in almost every situation that, in every development I've seen come through here, there's always been days where it becomes almost unacceptable, because the wind is so bad and nothing was done to keep the dirt under control as you go through. So, and maybe that's a comment for staff. This is a huge area, much bigger than any other area we've developed, other than, it's even larger than Surrey, right? So.
Yeah, well, as part of the building permit, they'll have to, of course, provide construction erosion control plan and a reseeding plan for the stockpile area and all of this kind of stuff. And so it's going to ultimately boil down to the best practices that are in the town code and, or whatever the town code embraces as part of that issue. And it'll be up to the staff then to police that to the best we can. One thing, this is maybe not going to be correct all the time, but the town center is on the east side of McCaslin. And the wind blows from the west, so it might be kind of weird out on US 36, but on a bad day, when...
Which is kind of scary, if you think
it is. But yeah, they'll be required to have that plan, it'll have to be approved, and it's be part of the building permit process, and the grading plan permit, they'll have to maintain that throughout the course of construction. Will that be a bad day? There'll probably be a bad day or two.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm just asking, just bringing it up to make sure you're aware of the issues we have here, so anything we can do to mitigate that would be appreciated.
Thank you.
I think that's...
Randy, along those lines, talk to us about the grading work that will be necessary before Main Street is put in. I know a lot of dirt from the south has got to be moved to the north. How much of that is going to happen prior to Main Street going in? And then I also heard that you can't do some further raising to the north because it's in the floodplain. And so how is that going to be done after Main Street gets in and kind of creates a barrier between the two sections? And
yeah, we don't want to take big trucks across our nice new streets.
Right.
And so we're going to, the blocks that are identified, the platted blocks as opposed to the sort of unplatted area here and here. These are blocks where we'll start off with the overlap grading and we'll pull material and stockpile it down here. There's the grading is multi-steps within steps, and that the best soil is in this area here, the soil that we want underneath the streets, and as the top lifts for the final lift of the grading, and so this soil here we're going to be taking down and stockpiling in the areas just outside of the floodplain, and we'll take all the soil that we need north of Main Street and stockpile it there until we get the permits to lay that down inside the floodplain. And so that's really how we phase it. So our hope is that we can get the permits quicker because FEMA is now paying a lot of attention, and these permits involve all of a large portion of Coal Creek. So our hope is, we've had a lot of discussions with staff, to work with staff and work with FEMA and Urban Drainage and Army Corps of Engineers to expedite the processing of our permits.
Okay. So moving of dirt is really step one. You've got to move all this dirt before any streets start going down.
We are, our plan is to have the grading equipment mobilized the first week of December.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Well, you mentioned that the better soil is the soil that's in situ there now. So what is the difference, or what are the characteristics of the soil you're going to be taking from the south and bringing it north?
It's more expansive and drier soil. It's been a lot longer since it's been exposed to water, and so part of the handling is it's always those expansive characteristics are fundamental to the soil composition. So the grading contractors, they call it conditioning the soil. They extensively condition the soil by adding a lot of water into it, and you try to get it really, really, really wet, and then you bury it really, really deep, so it's farther away from the exposure to the moisture evaporation, and then you put the better soil on top of it, and then you compact it in such a way so that you really, really minimize the the evaporation. And that's really what happens is when the soil's compacted, it's really, really, really wet. And you want to compact it deep, and you want to make sure it stays wet.
So bentonite and illite have been found in those soils? Do you know if those are the specific clay minerals that have been found, or is there some other aspect of calling it expansive soil that I'm not understanding? Is it tied to those specific clay minerals that tend to have the large expansion
I believe so.
characteristics?
Yes.
So it's going to be brought down, but the soil that's in situ there now is the desirable soil, is that right?
Yes.
And so then this is going to come in, but get mixed underneath it?
So what we're going to do, we have the big detention pond in the green, and then there's a couple of other smaller sediment ponds that aren't on this FTP. They're part of the grading plans. That's all relatively good material. We're going to dig all that out, and that's what we're going to preferentially build the Main Street roadway embankment with. Some of the building pads will have what Randy just described, the reprocessed claystone stuff will be the building pads, and we'll have to deal with that on each individual building site, but our goal is to put as much of the good alluvial material under the Main Street roadway that is available.
Okay, I'm going to have to cogitate on that a bit. Anything that says, we're moving expansive soils around in Superior doesn't go over real well for some people.
They're doing it on 36 right now, extensively. Can I ask a question? I noticed on the site utility plan, we're just doing storm sewer largely along Main Street, and then this water and this recycled water is kind of a straight shot off McCaslin down to the two primary BVI and Cornerstone tenants that you have going on there. So what's the future plan on water and sanitary sewer?
No, we have water in Main Street as well.
You do?
We need two 12-inch feeds off McCaslin. So there's one in Maine, the blue,
okay,
and there's also the one in Old Railway. There's also sanitary, which is actually the green, and that's the storm sewer isn't colored, but the green is sanitary. So Main Street has every utility in it, except for the sewer force main, which is in Recreation Way. And actually, it won't have a reuse water main. It will have reuse water to feed all of the irrigation, but it won't have like a dedicated 8-inch main. Just there's not enough space.
Okay.
Is there a map that shows water monitoring wells across the site and times of year and depths to water across the site?
There's not a map in the PD or the FDP, but there is well information in the geotech reports that were provided as part of the PD submittals.
Are those on file with us, Fred?
Yes. And they didn't really find, much water. As you would expect, there was some water in the borings along Coal Creek, but we don't think any of these, even the ponds are expected to be above seasonal high groundwater. They've drilled it a couple different times a year.
So do we know from the surface about how deep it is to groundwater?
In some cases, they didn't find it at all. But the site is so varied, I can't make a generalized statement about where groundwater is because the site has got so much topography on it. But many of the borings, they never even encountered groundwater.
And how deep were some of those borings?
Probably 30. They did some really deep borings for the mine investigation, which I actually have read the report. Yeah.
All right, I just wanted to make sure we covered that because we know we have water in other parts of town.
There's some areas down here that have problems with that.
Okay, great.
Other questions?
I know when I came back in after I left for a moment, they were asking questions about lighting, but I didn't hear that part, but he wanted some feedback, I think, on lighting, which we haven't really asked any questions or brought up. Do you guys remember what that was? Like I said, I missed that part.
We have to custom design and build or have manufactured lighting poles because of the structural requirements that we have for, as were described, we want to be able to hang festival lights and banners and flowers and things like that. And so these are our two designs that we have. As you probably know, Excel provides most lighting poles and things like that, but their poles don't accommodate our needs. And so we'd love to get feedback on, what lighting poles of these two, or if you don't like either of them, we'd love to know that. We can come up with other concepts to show the board.
Do both the designs you're presenting provide the appropriate light for both sidewalk and street?
Yes.
And one of the questions was...
They're taller than normal.
And that's the point, is that the design guidelines call for 16 feet, and these are 18, and that's just, you can't do a 16 with this? Is that the issue?
Well, we want to increase the spacing between the poles, and we also have, in your design guidelines, you don't have many 3 to 5 story buildings, and in the town core, we're going to have 3 to 5 story and possibly a 6 story building if we are able to get an urban hotel, and so that's where the poles even extend, above 18 feet. 18 feet is to the light fixture. The poles even extend above that because we wanted it to be just below the second story level. We don't want the light to obstruct somebody at the second floor level at night, and so we wanted the poles to be as big as possible without having that conflict, and that's how we came up with this height. Otherwise, you really have to push them up by another 6 to 8 feet to be in between the second and third floor. And so just in going through it all, we thought this is, it's more pedestrian scale, it's bigger than normal, and allows us to have a pretty nice separation. 98, I think it's 90 feet between the poles.
Do we have any feedback for them on the two that are up there?
I can sound off on it. I think the more historic-looking lighting is much more appealing and personally and consistent with the overall theme, which I really like what you guys have done in general, trying to go with this timeless theme that, like somebody said, day one, it'll look like it's been there for 50 years. And I think that's more consistent with it. When I look around at lighting in the vicinity, Louisville has done a lot of nice things, I think, with historic-looking street lamps, and I think we've done some nice stuff on Coal Creek Drive out here. But we've kind of trailed, I think, as a community in terms of looking for ways to dress up our streetscapes with historic-looking lighting. And, I think you nailed it on the right there. I think that's pretty consistent with what we were looking for.
I think the other advantage for the one on the right, and if you want kids playing on the light poles, the one on the left they'll probably play on because it's low enough that they can jump up on there. The one on the right being, there's just nowhere to go, it's a lot less likely.
A little higher.
Don't have any issues with that, but I used to climb on light poles.
So this is what we're looking at primarily in the core, not necessarily throughout the entire
Well, I think
development,
that's a good question. I mean, this lighting thing is really important at this stage because one of the assumptions was that your street lights would probably have a common theme throughout the entire development. There may be a change to a lower light along with a lower wattage along, say, pathways and things like that. But I thought we were looking at a consistent lighting scheme along the streets. And this is an FDP. And so we need to give them direction, for at least from the Planning Commission's position, about the lighting. The issue of the 16-foot versus an 18-foot, there's an interrelationship of about the amount of light that's spread on the ground. If you look at the photometrics that they have using this 18-foot pole, their hotspots never get above 2.5, I believe, foot candles, which is our lighting standards in the code have always been towards the low side rather than the high side. In fact, this company, Clan, helped us with our lighting standards when we were working on the code several years ago. And that's why, when I looked at the photometrics, I was looking to see on the hot spots as to how high they were getting, and they were never above 2.5, I believe, foot candles, which is right in line with our standards. So it's a question to me I think you need to give some direction on some of these things where they're talking about options, so that, because this is an FDP, and we need to look at the entire development, and along these main streets, I would assume that the lighting should be consistent, and I don't know if that's what you plan, but that's what I have assumed, looking at the design guidelines and that we've developed, and what's sort of been talked about, how this development is being put together.
Yes, and to that point, of course, the lighting here is all on Main Street and Recreation Avenue. We haven't really figured out what we're going to put in the southern planning areas, and we're not sure if those will be predominantly one-story or 2- and 3-story, maybe a 4-story here and there, depending on what type of live-work product. We're going to test that.
You might end up with zones, because you might have a portion of Marshall Road, for example, that comes into the town center, which is coming from the north. You got these other streets coming from the south towards Main Street, that the lighting pole should be fairly consistent within that particular zone. And then maybe changes, you go over the bridge on Marshall Road. I think we need to try to understand that a little bit, what your thought process is on that.
So the thought process is that the design would be consistent, maybe not exact.
Smaller version or a shorter version, because in residential, I didn't mean to interrupt, I'm sorry. But in residential areas, you won't need all of the different things that you have with the Tivoli lights, and, you might want a space for flower pots, but you could use the same basic design and just make it shorter in different areas.
Yeah, or at least it would sort of feel like that. We wouldn't take this and call it a 100% version and have a 75% version everywhere else. No. But as you said, we would have, we would be able to design it, and it would be, it's very likely we'd have 2 sizes, a smaller size than this, and we would have the theme being consistent. So, maybe the base is consistent and the fixtures are consistent, but you wouldn't have the banners and things like that.
I have a question then about the light on the right side. What are we calling it, the Tivoli or something? That when I see that kind of open lantern, my concern then is for the light that is scattering outside of the downward direction. And I don't know if these are engineered in a way where actually, because of the LED technology, it actually is keeping the light pointing downward and outward, because I think otherwise we'd end up with this development where we've got all this scattered light.
We won't be having scattered lights. With the LED technology that was identified, it's very much directional.
Okay.
Regardless of the fixture?
Regardless of the fixture.
Okay, then that answers my question on that. Is that right? Okay.
What about the pedestrian areas, the center, the maybe promenade area? Where we wouldn't be looking at 18 or 16 foot, I would assume, we'd be looking at much lower light poles?
Talking about planning area 3? Or in the town corridor?
In the town corridor.
My expectation is that we would have the same pole all throughout the town core, and probably planning area 1 and 2, and town, planning area, probably the main road we're calling Promenade down to connecting up to Rock Creek.
And even near the town square, you would see this type of lighting with these tall poles, or?
The town square would be the lighting poles that we're proposing. Possibly going down Promenade, the pedestrian promenade in between the buildings, pedestrian walkway would probably be a place to put, pardon me 1 second. So I think the main streets here, we're calling this Positive Place, and this is Old Rail Way, this is Park Way, and Promenade. The main streets in here would have the larger poles, and then possibly larger poles down to here, and then probably a secondary smaller pole around here, and probably the same thing, the lighting going down the pedestrian promenade.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from just about everybody is that we're okay with the taller pole, maybe for the core, where banners and so on would be necessary, and then a shorter version of the same as we move out.
One also in the promenade.
Yes.
Yeah. Fred, does that address your concerns?
Sure.
That you brought up?
Okay.
Are the street names done deal? Is that, I mean, are these just what you're calling them through?
We were told to propose street names, so we have, and
So they're just proposed at this point?
they're proposed. If you think about, there's only 2 streets on the PD. Pardon me. There's only 2 streets on the PD, Main Street and Recreation Avenue. We're going back and forth, is it Recreation Road, because it's Marshall Road, or Recreation Avenue, and I think maybe we've tossed a coin. If you have a strong sense, we'd love to hear about that. But those are the only 2 street names that we've proposed on this PD.
Yes, so on the final plat, I mean, that was one of my issues. I'm not wild about Avenue A and Street 6 and Street 5. Once this is platted and recorded, that's what they will be called. Am I correct?
Again, they'll be called that way until they get a route plat.
Should we change them?
I think my opinion is, I think they should be changed before this goes to the board and have regular names for them than Street 6 and Street 5. I'm not crazy about those names.
Name one after each of us? I mean, what do Mr. Road?
That's what you wish for.
McCool Avenue?
I mean, this could be a rabbit hole we don't want to go down.
Yeah, it could take us into the weeds.
I'm not in love with the names I mean, and so if that is a rabbit hole we need to go down today, it would probably be worth, having some discussion and not, whether we recommend that the board take this on and the theme come out of this and
We could spend all night debating names, so I don't think we even go down, I don't think that's...
Well, I know that seems like the right decision, but we're hearing from our town clerk that if we don't go down there, these names will be...
Well, I think...
Can we change it when it becomes the final plat?
Well, the board is going to take this up, so I think they come back with names and then let the board...
We can name it
We can make a recommendation that the board do that. I mean, if we feel like
Yeah.
the naming needs to have a little more consistent.
Maybe in the meantime, we can have a public naming contest online or something like that.
Well, definitely want to leave it there, but I don't think we should.
I mean, I'll put in my 2 cents, not seeing what's on the other side in this map, but I would like, where possible, to have some continuity to established names that we have, for example, in Original Town. If it seems appropriate, if it looks like something actually lines up roughly with William Street, then why not have it be part of that? Again, the whole idea to have it feel like it's an integrated part of town rather than this standalone. I would like for us to be able to make that recommendation to the town board that where possible, extend names or schema from the other side of the road.
And the only street that seems to line up is Main Street. And we like Main Street, and we've always thought of it as Main Street. And then we were sort of challenged because the town starts just west of McCaslin with First Avenue.
First Avenue.
So, and in fact, I didn't know that. I thought it started with Second Avenue, and a lot of us didn't know that. So on our application, we put First Avenue for our first street, we thought, how great, you know, that you would come in First and Main, and then I asked the town if they'd change the name of First Avenue, they didn't want to, so.
Now it sounds like Lower Manhattan,
Yeah, so,
A and B and C.
and then so, I think candidly, we're talking to a major office tenant on this block here, and if we are able to attract a major office tenant, they're going to have a big say into what that street name is. We wanted just to have a street name that is positive, and so I helped build a Boys and Girls Club once, and we put it on Positive Place, and we called it One Positive Place. So I thought, oh, well, we'll just recycle that. And a lot of people like that. And then, you know, there's it's an old rail line there, and so Old Railway, and this is the park area up here. So Parkway, not Parkway, Parkway. That's just kind of how we thought about it, but we're not. And then this is the pedestrian promenade. We were going to keep this Coal Creek, but then it was pointed out, well, Coal Creek's over here somewhere and doesn't really line up with anything, so we figured we'd fix that.
Well, Coal Creek
because we're
also
gonna-
runs up to Rock Creek. I mean, there was some thought that someday those would all just kind of, it's not going to happen, but, you know.
It's not going to happen, and there's addresses on Coal Creek over here, and there aren't any addresses on Coal Creek down in Rock Creek Ranch.
Yeah.
And there'll be addresses here, so we had figured we had to change it, and so this is the pedestrian promenade. You know, kind of just back the historical street naming convention is, you know, what does it really, what's the function? Is it market? Is there a market on the street? Is it the main street? Recreation, so, you know, recreation, we have the recreation, little fields here, the park here, the indoor recreation here, so Recreation Avenue. And that's why we switched back to Avenue, because you have First Avenue, Second Avenue, Third Avenue. We're stuck with Marshall Road, it's already Marshall Road, and it's kind of changing direction, so that's just our thinking.
With the street that you have marked as Coal Creek Drive, does it just dead end at the end of the development there, or does that hook into another street?
It would hook into Coal Creek Drive.
Oh, Coal Creek Drive in Rock Creek.
Right.
Well, I'd have to go across another private property. There's a private property in between that. But the idea was that road, try to get those to connect somehow or another in the future.
And it's only the fact that we have houses and buildings facing that street that are going to have a street address that would create a real conflict having two different sections of Coal Creek.
There's Coal Creek Drive in Louisville with the same zip code that creates issues as well. That gives you another address set that you have to compete with, so.
That's a good point. No, that's a good point. I did have a question about the final plat. In the final plat, Marshall is not connected over Coal Creek. Maybe explain the reason that the final plat does not show that being connected. And then also, the final plat doesn't have the streets, including Coal Creek connection on the final plat.
Well, Coal Creek alignment is, we have a conceptual alignment, but that's going to have to be approved by FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers. And it could move a little bit here and there, so we can't, you know, plat it out exactly, because it's going to affect the high water mark. So we can't, I mean, that will come forward on a future FDP, once we get the permits for that bridge.
Okay.
That's the same for Marshall Road as well.
I was referring to Marshall Road.
You're referring to Marshall Road, but you were also talking about Coal Creek.
I was talking about Coal Creek to the south. There's a lot of streets on the PD that are not on the final plat.
Oh, well, here, yeah. So we just platted, it takes a lot of surveying and engineering work, and so we platted the blocks that we're going to start grading.
Okay.
And we didn't plat, and then we're in discussions with a hotel, a couple of different hotel groups. So we wanted to plat the hotel because we're trying to get that going. And then this is land we're going to be transferring to the town. So we needed to plat that and get a separate legal description. And this is the one block in the town core well, this is half of Block 7, I believe, and this is Block 3. It's the one block that's completely out of the floodplain, and so conceivably we could develop that early. So, I think that the northern portion of that is going to be stockpile location. So that's kind of how we came about which blocks we'd spend the extra time and money to precisely identify to put on the plat.
Okay.
Does this address the turn-in from Marshall Road into Superior Plaza Drive?
We don't change that.
It doesn't change.
So that's going to stay
as is for now.
That land's being conveyed to the town, so the town will totally own and control that.
Okay, so they'll just do the improvements on Marshall Road?
We're not proposing any changes. I mean, it won't change.
Okay.
When we pick up Marshall Road, it'll be beyond that, it'll be right about here, beyond that access point.
So that's our responsibility?
Well, yeah, part of the Marshall Road is built there.
Correct.
And my assumption is, Alex, I think that the right-of-way that they show is the existing right-of-way that's there now. Okay, on this plat, the right-of-way, but it's built, so they're going to build up to it, which puts it below, probably somewhere below Block 1, Lot 2, where they're going to build from.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about that turn in, that left turn into Superior Liquor, Old Chicago, into the Superior Plaza. That's not really a great road.
You'd have to, well, I think depending on how this is constructed, if there needs to be some modification of that, the town will have to do it.
We've shown this just as it is on the approved PD amendment. So this is just exactly as it is.
Yeah, I just remember discussions, I don't know where the responsibility lies, I just remember us having discussions about, ensuring that road would continue to exist.
That's there. It may be, I mean, that is part of the way this is platted. That'll stay there. That'll be there. There'll be that connection. The other issue of whether or not to improve that connection is something the town's going to have to decide whether they want to do or not.
Because there was discussion about ultimately having a left turn lane actually in there, which...
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like that needs to be thought about. I mean, obviously not, till we get the bridge across and we actually start using, that road starts to get used, it's not a big deal, but we'll need to keep an eye on that, I would think, as this progresses, so.
Okay, other questions from the commissioners to the applicant, then we'll go on to staff. Any additional staff comments or questions? None? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Anything additional from staff?
I'll just, in terms of summary, we've got a plat, there's two cases here. We've got a plat, and we've got the FDP, number 1. So when you get around to your deliberations, you need to do 2 resolutions, one for each case, okay? And please do the plat first, so then there's a legal plat, or at least there's a recommended plat, and you're recommending this FDP to fit on this plat.
Okay.
So that would be the sequence to do it in.
Okay.
Okay? Lisa, do you have anything? Any questions, though, you might have, you can throw them our way. If you have any questions.
Any commissioner questions for staff? I had one that may actually be more of an applicant question. On Recreation Drive, I had a question of Recreation Avenue.
I do too.
How would cars turn around to get parked on that street? Because from the drawing, the angled parking is kind of opposite of the ways the car comes in Main Street. They take a right on Recreation, but then they'd have to do a U-turn to access the parking spaces in front of the future Boulder Valley Ice, and I'm wondering if you're going to build a temporary turnaround at maybe at the end of that until circulation gets such that that's not an issue.
Well, the southern intersection, it accommodates a turning radius for, the average vehicle. But I think that's, what you described is exactly what will have to happen. They'd have to go south to Old Railway and Recreation Avenue, do a U-turn and come back in, particularly if they're going in between existing cars.
Okay. And along the lines of that parking for that future Boulder Valley Ice Cornerstone, why do you need to build that temporary lot for them? Because their FDP hadn't even come forward. And I read in there that it's anticipating their future parking needs. So shouldn't that all come together?
Well, when you evaluate their FDP, they're going to have to meet the parking standards in our PD, in the approved PD, and they won't have the land to do it. And so you'll look at the cumulative parking, the way the PD is, you look at all the parking in the various phases of the project. So this is all in planning area 2. And so it's important that we go concurrent or before them to show that, so when they come forward, they'll show their on-site parking plus the parking we're providing, and cumulatively it actually exceeds the parking standards in the PD. And that's why we needed to do that, because they wouldn't have the land to accommodate additional spaces.
Okay, when that temporary parking goes away, where are those 80 spaces going to be permanently?
So there's a number of ways that we could address that. And I could give you, I'll tell you my best guess right now. The way it's going to happen, though, is that with each FDP that comes forward, we have to, on a cumulative basis, show the parking demand and the parking supply, the parking provided, and show that on a cumulative basis with each FDP, we meet the parking requirements. And so, well, that's just how it will happen. What I believe will happen is that the parking, there's a block 12 lot 3, that's this parcel right here, that will be also really temporary surface parking until the town core builds out a little bit more and we have the increment to support bonds to build a parking structure. And so we have a 3-level parking structure that's been designed there by Walker Parking, and that's goes precisely to the dimensions that are in BVI's FDP. And so that will then accommodate the parking, and it will free up the temporary parking to be removed and replaced with a building. So this will need to go in at the time that we have the ability to develop that piece of property.
Will the street parking that they're also essentially using, will that also be transferred to that deck?
Well, the street parking is just part of the parking supply. And we look at all the town core as a cumulative parking demand and parking supply. And the on-street parking is part of the parking supply calculation.
Okay.
So I have a question, and I don't know if this would be for Alex or staff. So when you think of Cornerstone Orthopedics, I think of things like people who have had knee surgery, people who have had shoulder surgeries, whatever, and they're going to be parking where to try to then enter the building, walk a block or 2 or 3 to get there?
Well, I don't have a definite design for Cornerstone, but my assumption is they'll have to have a drop-off area. So you drive in, I mean, if you've got knee problems, you're probably not driving anyway, but if you do, you're single patient, then that could be a bit of a problem but they're going to have a drop-off area where the majority of people will drop off that person who needs to go in there, and someone goes parks the car. And they will be the ones that have to walk that distance back to the building.
I think Cornerstone believes none of their patients have knee problems. And they all need rehabilitation.
Have you been in these situations?
For the ones that aren't the ones that haven't already had their surgery or their rehabilitation, we have, there's on-site parking behind the Cornerstone building.
Is there?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's going to be
I think
real
because they've done too many
important.
surgeries.
When we parse out parking, that's one of the few places where I think we've got to do something right.
Well, when we get to that FDP, yeah, we're going to have, obviously, some discussions should be around those issues.
Okay.
So definitely. So BVI's parking is purely the site parking, the 100 plus the 80, or do they have additional parking as well that they're planning to bring forward? Do you know?
Yes, BVI, well, so there's about 110 surface spaces here, and I think 60 surface spaces, is that right, 60, something like that, up here?
Not in the temporary, but
in two permanent locations.
In two permanent locations, because it's
And
some
then
of those plus the 100 plus the 80.
When we construct this space here, we'll have to provide that 110 spaces somewhere else.
Okay.
And then we'll construct that, and then that'll have 280 spaces, and so we're going to be constantly moving around parking.
So there will be, can you just give me that total number again, right around that area for BVI?
For BVI, there'll be around 330 spaces.
Okay, plus Cornerstone has their own, they're planning on providing additional
So
spaces.
BVI, Cornerstone together, because keep in mind that Cornerstone is, really 8:30 to 4:30 is when they...
Sure, but you were saying that in the Cornerstone's going to be bringing forward parking spaces in the rear of their building.
Right.
So that 300 you gave me includes those?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So we look at the parking on a cumulative basis.
Okay.
But also BVI's highest use is off-peak hour for Cornerstone's use.
Well, right, yeah. I just saw them the other day, we were walking up here, and there were easily 150 cars that were parked there.
Yeah, and so you'd see during the day,
And they're doubling
at
in size.
8:30 to 4:30, it's not as utilized, and then, and so that's when, so it all goes into the shared parking formula that we have in the PD also. But we also looked at it for BVI.
And it was thought, yeah, because they can draw some heavy attendance.
Right, and that's also why we didn't include the on-street parking beyond Promenade in our calculation of what we provided for BVI. And so we provided the spaces we need to up there and didn't include on-street parking that's being constructed.
And I know you have potential garage locations for parking as well. So is it, just going forward, if BVI all of a sudden is just going nuts and bringing in 400 cars on the weekend or 500 cars on the weekend, is there some trigger point where, hey, we don't have enough parking spaces, the garage has to go in? How does that trigger happen? Is it 50 people can't find a parking space and they're, how do we?
Yeah, there's a number of trigger points. In our agreement with BVI, they have to monitor their parking demand.
Okay.
And for tournaments and things like that, they have to have a parking plan.
Okay.
Just like if any event operator was going to have a big event, they have to provide a parking plan to the town. BVI for events will have to provide a parking plan to us, and under certain circumstances, we would have to provide that, or BVI would also have to provide that to the town.
Okay.
And they also have to monitor, if they're having, 2 car trips per person, if mom's bringing, Johnny to come play hockey and dad and aunt and uncle are all coming in separate cars, they're going to have to monitor that, and they're going to have to institute a parking, a shared ride, or they'll have to somehow manage the parking demand of their customers.
And do they do that today with us, or is that something new that they're going to start doing?
No.
No. Okay. And they know they're going to have to start doing this?
Yeah, they're
reporting.
aware of it.
Okay.
At the end of the day, maybe when all the cars become electric, it'd be a different issue. But right now, people are really sensitive to combined trips and things like that.
Okay. Any additional questions? Okay. So at this point, we'll open it up for public comment, if there's any public comment. Anyone from the public wish to comment on our two matters before us?
Hi, Brent Bickle, Eldorado Drive. I guess I wanted to first start off and just echo what Commissioner Whitmester and Commissioner Eaton said, especially with Commissioner Eaton, Flatirons Crossing Mall. I'll never forget the day, to this day, when we walked into the mall the first day with our toddlers and our 2 baby stroller, hit the rough pavers that they put on there of natural stone. And after about 50 feet of the shaking, our children started crying, and we had to pull them out of the stroller and push the empty stroller along the mall the rest of the way. So I think it is critical that if we're going to have a walkable community, especially one that's designed to appeal to more elderly residents, that I think pavers are great, I think they look great, but we need to make sure that they're smooth, that the gaps are as narrow as possible, and we have a community that is stroller and wheelchair and high heel friendly.
Have your width or your high heels?
Yes, no, not me, but I understand how important that could be. When I was looking at the diagrams of the streets and the width of the sidewalk, I was thinking about that 9 feet. And if you've got Main Street or a high density area where people are going back and forth to the hockey rink, or there's hundreds of people that live there, maybe you've got somebody has a potted plant out there or a trash can or something, and it's only 8 feet. And I'm thinking, is that going to be enough for 2 couples to pass comfortably by each other and give people enough walking room? And if not, and if it should be wider, maybe we should think about trying to have more space in between what the trees or the benches or the bike racks, so just depending on how many people we have, so people, if there's too many people, they don't feel crammed into sort of that 9 feet continuous walkway. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention, in your packet, when they talk about the parking, on item 6, page 2 of the packet, about halfway down, it lists the parking space counts for the various areas in the FDP. And those parking counts are different than the ones in the Phase 1 FDP narrative on page 3. So on your packet, on the packet sheet, it says angled spaces on Main Street is 58, but on the FDP narrative, they put it at 66. And then on the west side of Recreation Avenue, the town packet says 27 spaces, the narrative says 28, and on the east side of Recreation Avenue, the packet has 27, and the FDP narrative has 35. And I was just curious why those were different. And that's all I had.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Rita Dozell, Superior resident. Do we have lights or Phyllis? Oh, well, you don't have to get up. Oh, okay, thank you. Talking about the clay that's on the southern half of the property, that's really not expansive so much as it needs to be compacted. And like what Randy was talking about, it's going to be very hard to compact it. Rock Creek Ranch filing was graded in 1989 and 1990. And we're still settling. The area where I live has settled a foot since 1990. So we keep dropping, because it's very hard to compact that soil. So I know that they're going to put a lot of water on, but we put a lot of water on too. And when I built our house in 17 years, I've dropped actually 8 inches in that area. So we don't expand, we're actually compacting. We need to compact, and it takes naturally 17 to 25 years for soil to compact that's been excavated. So it'll be interesting to see if it ever stops moving downward during the lifetime of this project. Then on Main Street, the roundabout there, I'm wondering, is it similar in size to the Marketplace roundabout that we have? I don't know if it's, similar in size to that one. And I like that one because we should consider maybe an art installation in that circle. Think of the wild horses or the Broncos that are there. Beautiful. I think that looks very nice there. I like the idea of the tall trees, the evergreen trees, but that might be a good place to put some kind of an art installation, particularly since we have to spend a certain percentage of the project cost for art. Length of the warranty on paver installations. I know we're going to have a lot of problems with the pavers. I love the pavers. I think they're gorgeous, but I think that, I think about 16th Street Mall in Denver, and it's almost prohibitive to replace those huge pavers that they have there now. It's beautiful, but they're talking about $1 million per, I don't know how many, it's not like a block or something to replace those pavers. I like them, but, I'm glad that Alex and Randy and the others are trying to figure out how to deal with that. So the warranty, I guess, is who repairs them and who digs them up and digs up the concrete under them and all that. How long does it happen, or how long does it take before it ends up being the town's responsibility rather than the developers? I heard Alex talk about that. Next 5 to 10 years, I'm going to have to be repairing them. Landscaping around the detention ponds, I lean toward more trees and plantings rather than fewer. I know we need the xeriscape thing, but it's great to have that planted, not a tree here and a couple plantings there. Temporary parking lot, how long will it be there? Should it be paved? Is that temporary parking lot going to be there for 5 years or 10 years? Lift station, the brick, metal, glass finishes, will that design fit into the rest of the buildings that are going to be there? Street lights, I like the second one with the more traditional one. I like the seat walls, that idea, suggestion to put them there to sit in is perfect. If you go to Main Street, Disneyland, they've got a lot of those plantings behind. People sit there all the time. Then also, larger pavers are better walking on. We got that. We heard that also from Brent. And then along Recreation Avenue, do we need a bus stop? Some place where a bus to actually stop, because if you got a place where a bus eventually may come down and pick up people, it's very hard to get there. So, and I think that's probably it. A couple of the other things were answered. Trees along the square, I like trees along the square. I don't think we should give up on those. They're there on one of the plans, and I'm not sure they're there on some of the ones that were up here, but I think we should keep the trees along there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Going once, twice. Okay. Any final comments from the applicant following the, okay.
You want to ask him to respond to the soils, or?
Pardon?
Do we want to ask him to respond to the soils comments, or?
Yeah, respond.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have two comments. Brent is correct on the parking. Initially, the handicap parking wasn't factored in or wasn't factored in accurately, and when that was caught, then the plans were revised and the narrative wasn't. So we apologize for that, and we'll correct the narrative. But to Brent's question, the plans are accurate. And then just to some of Rita's points, as far as trees on the town square, I apologize if I made it seem like the debate was whether or not we should have trees or fewer or more trees. The question was, should we have all the trees in tree grates, or should we have some of the trees in planter areas, but not getting rid of trees? And so we love the trees as well. Our plan is to have the bus stop on the main square, town square, and then people can walk a block pretty much either direction and get around the project. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further questions of the applicant, staff, or anything before I close the public hearing and we have discussion?
Hey, Randy, can you respond to the temporary parking, like how long that would be there? I think you did sort of allude to that a little bit in the discussion. Is that based on need? Will it stay there as long as it's needed?
Yes.
Okay. So as long as, so whatever the parking requirements are, you'll provide that as potentially temporary parking.
That's right.
For as long as need be.
That's
right. And that's not paved or asphalt, that's going to be crushed asphalt?
Yeah, recycled.
Or recycled?
Recycled asphalt.
Asphalt, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions of staff or the applicant before I close the public hearing? Another comment?
Alex Arnold, Public Works Director. In response to Rita's comment about warranties, the town's standard warranty is 2 years from date of substantial completion, so the developer is responsible for maintaining the road during that time and fixing anything that may happen during that warranty period. I believe the pavers may have a longer period. I mean, at least we had some claims from the people we visited that those things last for a certain amount of time. So we may get a longer period for the pavers, but I can't guarantee that at this point. But we'll look into that, how long those last and whether they get replaced over a longer time period. But our normal warranty is 2 years.
And what, Alex, what's your general feeling just about pavers and?
General feeling, I'm skeptical. I mean, I think they look great, and I think they're probably, maybe a little higher maintenance down the road. But there are trade-offs, and I'm worried as you that we have these soils that move. So I'm going to make sure that it's your call in terms of what materials to use, but we need to advise you in terms of how long they last and what the maintenance issues are going forward. I'm open to them. I think they look fine, and I think with the proper construction materials, they'll last.
Maintenance-wise, or, you're looking at cost 10% more over 20 years, or twice as much over 20? Can you give us some, do you have any idea of what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's hard. I'll have to look at that. This is going to be a high-maintenance area. We're going to have, we want to maintain a high-quality environment here, so it's not going to be, it'll be higher maintenance than our normal streets.
So even if they were just cement or asphalt, they would...
But we're looking at what, snow and ice materials we need to use, whether there's any special materials we have to use, things of that nature. But, I think they'll work. It's just a matter of whether we get the movement that, that's been experienced in other areas. And we got to look at what happened in those areas and whether they have the proper construction techniques. We're going to make sure we have proper techniques, because we have good engineers in this project.
Well, in the town core area where we're going to have significant shadow zones as it affects the pavement, I would really be looking carefully at, what is the shovelability or whatever the case may be on these, or maybe you've got to bring in snow blowers all the time or something. Of course, you got to figure out where the snow's going to get blown to, but I think of things like that, and I really do wonder how appropriate it will be when we get into that kind of weather, which can be significant.
Could we ask Randy or Jim just maybe to speak to this just a little bit more as far as where you're seeing and how well it's working? Is there any areas similar to Colorado with freezing that we get, and how maintenance is happening? And I know you went through it once, but maybe talk about it again.
Yeah, and I...
Did you close the public hearing?
No. You did or didn't?
No.
I agree with everything Alex said, and he has to do his diligence and verify what we've heard from the paving manufacturers. But there's a couple of ways of looking at this. One, what's indisputable is that the paving materials are constructed to a much higher durability and density and strength than concrete, which would be the other best option. And so based on that, the pavers have a 50-year life. They do come with a longer warranty. I think it's 10 years, but Paul couldn't recall, and that's my best recollection. The other thing is, if you're going to have movement, because we have a concrete subbase, so if you're going to have movement, you'd rather have movement where between your concrete subbase and your finished lift, your final lift of pavers, you have gravel. Because if we have movement, we can go in there and pull up a bunch of blocks, take out the gravel, add gravel, whatever. And if there's a problem at the subbase, pull out all the gravel, fix that, put the gravel back, and put the pavers back, and it looks just fine.
How thick is that gravel?
It was 18 inches.
Okay, so it's pretty...
It varies depending on whether it's permeable or impermeable.
But it's significant.
But it's more than
not just a few inches, I mean, it's 12 inches.
More than a foot.
Okay.
And so, and as as Rita said, if everything's dropping, you can add in more gravel, and if it's rising more than a foot, we have worse problems than that, but I'd rather have...
And that's going to affect cement or asphalt. I mean, it doesn't matter what the road is at that point.
Exactly. So this is a better condition to deal with moving soils, and it's something that's quick. You have much quicker response time to fix, and once it's done, no one knows that it was a problem. They have been used in the mountain towns for 50 years, and our paving contract, or the Paystone provided a bunch of contacts for both public agencies in the mountain towns and in the greater Denver area. And then Alex has reached out to his colleagues in these other towns. So we'll work with staff and with the town, and we'll hear what they have to say, and we'll use best practices. But it seems to us that this is the best application to maintain a high-quality environment in perpetuity.
And then to move into the pedestrian areas, again, this, what Brent was talking about, the stroller going like this. You're talking about much larger...
Well, his kids are older now. I don't know.
Well, that's right. But you were talking about much larger pavers in the walk areas,
That's right.
Is that correct? So
That's
they
right.
would be as seamless.
We agree.
We're not talking about any,
Yeah. Certain people on our team are very happy when women can wear high heels and are supportive of that environment. And
some are.
Strollers and things like that. It's really important. So that's why we've looked at bigger and bigger pavers that, nothing's absolutely flat, but the more dense, what we want to avoid are cracks. Cracks are more dangerous than, a native material that's not cracking, but there's a little bit of, it's not absolutely flat. There's a little bit of texture to the surface. The joints are really important. The seams, the joints between the stones are really important. So everything Brent said, we concur with. We want, and that's why we've identified this 5-foot walking area. So it can be described as a sidewalk within a sidewalk, to mentally push everybody to our town square and to the retail around the town square. That'll be the comfortable place to walk, and then a pathway down the pedestrian promenade down to the restaurant down there and the fields, to draw people in from the fields, and pushing the strollers, rollerblading, however they're doing it. But we're trying to subconsciously make it really, really convenient and friendly for people to come walking around the town square, around where all the retail is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Because after I close the public hearing, we cannot ask any more questions of the applicant or staff. Just making sure. Okay. Public hearing's closed. Now we can have discussion amongst ourselves. Who wants to start?
So you want to start with the pavers?
Well, actually, let's start with the final plat. Let's start with final plat discussion. Get that discussed, vote on that, or make a resolution on that, and then move on to the other one. So, discussion about the final plat.
Any concern about where it's parcel, lots?
My questions were addressed during the discussions.
On the street.
I'm good.
The street names, that's the only thing that's kind of concern, ornament or not, I don't know, but, and again, I agree, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole trying to figure out what the street names ought to be, but I'd like to make a recommendation that to the town board that some consideration be given to the theme or a connection to original town or something in the street naming conventions. I'm happy with leaving it at that.
I'd be fine with that. I'm sure they'll have an opinion.
They can send it back to us.
Oh, no, they'll take care of it, I'm sure. Everybody good with that? Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I was noticing the Spicer Shack property, let's see. Are we addressing the open space? Just have the open space requirements, are they? Didn't really talk about that, but I'm sure it's covered because there was a lot of discussion around making sure that we had the appropriate buffers on the Spicer Shack property. I didn't even ask about that or look, I don't know if that's being addressed. Or whether, I just haven't verified it.
They really didn't do anything on that south end.
No, that's true. I think it's the south end. But does that fall into the plat, or will that be addressed in a future plat, or do you know, Phyllis?
Sure.
It would have to be addressed.
Yeah, it would be addressed in the future plats as they block this out, make sure that those buffers are being honored with any type of street configuration or block.
Okay.
But right now, those buffers are in Super Lot 4 and Super Lot 5.
Okay. Yeah, it just mentioned whereas a final plat, replats the property to reflect inclusion of the Spicer Shack property, the addition of which was approved by the amendment to the Superior Town Plan Development Zone District Plan and includes the Spicer Shack property to the south. But we're not dealing with the open space buffers in this plan. Okay.
No.
Okay, I think so. Someone like to make a motion for resolution?
Be happy to if nobody else wants to.
Okay.
All right, so motion from the Planning Commission, resolution number PC-5, it's a resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior recommending approval of the final plat, replat in case number SUB-FP-2013-1. With the following conditions that the Planning Commission recommends to the town board that consideration be given to the street naming conventions to come up with a theme or some connection to original town, and that applicant shall make minor technical and red line corrections to plans as identified by town staff.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner McCool, second by Commissioner Eaton. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Passes unanimous. Okay, our next item is the resolution of the Planning Commission recommending approval of final development plan, Phase 1. So discussion on the final development plan.
Now it's time to talk about the So what are the, do we want to maybe just line up what the issues of discussion are, I mean, we've got pavers, we have lighting. Let's see, I've got my list back here. What was that?
Planters.
Planters, yeah.
You had mentioned bollard sleeves at the road closure at
Yeah, we had that,
Street.
yeah.
That was another good one.
Addressing the road closures.
And then Brent brought up the inconsistency in the parking figures, so.
Well, he explained that.
No, but we just want to correct it.
Yeah, make sure
Yes,
that
yeah.
That they match.
Tied off.
Yeah.
And parking numbers. That was between the staff report, the narrative.
Narrative and the staff
Yeah,
report.
Between plans and narrative. And let's see.
Warranties on the pavers.
What was that?
Warranties on the pavers.
Pavers and
Well,
warranties.
there's, well, we didn't discuss it a lot, but there's warranty of the material, but then there's warranty of all the workmanship
Yeah,
that
the
puts it in
installation.
place.
Yeah.
These are very different things. You could have a paver last a million years, but if you didn't put it in right,
Right.
what have you got?
We have the bike racks, whether we like them as they are, and whether we want to consider something else. And we also, I mentioned, Brett just brought up the spacing for scooters. And I think I
So probably further consideration and guidance needs to be provided on placement, density of those features.
We could with the bike rack.
Proprietary,
Oh, what's that?
or whether it's proprietary or not, because those are pretty custom deals.
I like them. I think they look cool. I don't know what anybody else thinks. As long as they can lock your bike. and-
I was going to say.
Yeah. I mean, I like the looks of it. It looked like you could hook up as many as probably 3, 4 bikes on one of those poles.
Well, the design guidelines call out for how many and rough placements. I'm not sure what.
He wanted some feedback.
Okay.
He asked for feedback on those bike racks,
Right.
what we thought of them, so
Okay.
that's the only reason I had it on the list. And I don't know whether we want to think about, whether scooters are going to pull up there, or whether we want to say no, and I don't know whether we have that option to just say no scooters on the sidewalks, or if that's a state, is that a state law, or is that a town? Do we care? Do we even,
You can say no scooters on sidewalks.
if we want to, but,
Skateboards, no scooters.
well, with those pavers, you're not going to have skateboarders, right?
Oh, I know, that might be pretty interesting.
Lighting, we talked about. Let's see. So I think those are the issues. So pavers, lighting, planters, road closure, parking numbers, yeah.
Bike racks.
Bike racks, yeah. Said that, but didn't write it down.
Well, just the furnishings and safe furnishings in general. Do we want to do this?
Planters and furnishings, those go together?
Well, furnishings being a bench, the dish out, the waste receptacle is unique. They're pretty proprietary, even those tree greens.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Lot of much of them.
So,
Now, you keep bringing up, I'm sorry.
well, yeah, Commissioner Eden talked about planters with the seats versus versus the, is that what you're referring
Yeah,
to?
the planters when I talk
Okay,
about.
yeah.
Safe furnishings being the things that were just the
Right.
ornamental stuff.
Planters with seats.
What about do we want to talk about the technical issue that Brent brought up about the width of the, I didn't really ask, I meant to ask about it, but I didn't ask any more about the width of.
The sidewalk.
It was 9 feet,
Yeah.
I mean, the sidewalks are 14 feet, but there are places because of the tree grades and such, so it's 9 feet.
Well, and we haven't even talked about where, like, if a restaurant wants to put seating outside, then how that impacts what's left, and then therefore what features should or shouldn't be there to accommodate walkers versus some of those, seatings outside,
Well, I think
pushing them.
We might have to dig, because we can't ask them, but I think there's enough information, I think there was some information provided about the 14 feet, I thought, was the minimum width of the walkways, and I would imagine that.
But what if
Where
those...
restaurants are going to go, that they're going to, I mean, those are going to come later. There's really nothing that we're talking about today that I think a restaurant would exist on, except for, well, there might be one in the Boulder Valley Ice. I think there was some discussion about that. But I would imagine in those places, those sidewalks would be larger than 14 feet.
But would they, where the tables come out, would those be where the walking pavers are versus the others? That now brings up a
Yeah, I just don't
question
think we
that I
have
can't
anything
ask.
in front of us today about that, but
And I would think
other than, yeah.
most of the restaurants would theoretically want to be on the town square, where that's what it's for, is spreading out there.
Yeah.
Versus
Overlooking the park.
along a narrower sidewalk space.
What else was brought up in
Any concern about the paver joints?
Yeah, I've got papers, yeah.
I think that kind of fits in our general paver concern category.
Rita brought up the art in the middle of, artwork in the middle. I'd actually like to touch on that, because I like it too, but I have some concerns about art in the middle of a roundabout, but.
To have art somewhere.
I think that's the list. We'll start at the top. All right, favors?
Okay. Favors.
We all in favor of favors, or we all opposed to favors? Where are we at?
Well, I think the design.
As it was discussed.
Design guidelines have driven us to pavers. I mean, that's what
Yeah, I
there.
agree.
So I think we've identified the concerns, and I think there's a lot of concerns that got to be worked out, but.
Do we want to pass our concerns along to the town board in this resolution?
Well, I would like to just comment that I think the design guidelines just were trying to establish that you don't have a monotony of gray pavement. I don't think it necessarily says you've got to go pavers. I think the intent is to just make sure we don't have a monotony. And so this kind of goes to the extreme on the other side. And so I think it's going to be worthwhile for the town board to really discuss that and try to understand what their intent was in that guideline.
So what does that sound like in a recommendation?
Pavers versus stamped concrete, colored concrete options.
It says it just really recommended they take a close look at the number of pavers, the amount of pavers.
Yeah,
And type of pavers, smoothness.
yeah. Thorough understanding of what the,
And then what are our concerns? So one of the concerns was the,
Uneven surfaces.
yeah, the uneven surfaces that could create.
and the seams.
And this is primarily in the pedestrian area where we're not as concerned, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm satisfied.
We just recommend that they consider those issues and then follow the direction of staff and the applicant.
All right.
Sure.
Is there any other issues with pavers?
One of the photos I saw had the sandstone or flagstone inlaid with pavers or side by side on pavers, and to me, I don't really care for that look. I kind of like one or the other. To me, it looks like a repair. It looks like you took out some pavers and put in the flagstone. It just didn't. I love flagstone look and
Yeah,
benches
it's hard
and
to live with.
but and then that one walkway that you pointed out it was really uneven, so
Yeah.
I'm a little more concerned about using flagstone for walking surfaces in any fashion, unless they were, truly really thick pieces cut exactly square, so that there was just, that can be done. It certainly can be done.
Well, I'm happy with the type of installation they talked about with the subsurface,
You mean the concrete?
The concrete and the gravel, then the stone on top. I didn't actually ask if that was the case in the pedestrian walkways, but,
And you're unhappy with that because?
no, I would be happy. I
I
am,
would be happy.
I mean, I am happy. I'm not
Okay.
unhappy. I am happy with that explanation and how it
It's
would.
my hearing tonight.
Good solution.
Okay, so.
Anything else?
Pavers, smoothness, walkability, those are our concerns.
Streets we're okay with? Maintenance sounds like it might be a little higher, but they're going to have high maintenance anyway, and I do really like the idea that we're not going to have, strips of, every time somebody comes in, cut the pavement and patch it, and it looks horrible, and, this, I like how the pavers will.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, should we look at you on any issues with papers that you want to pitch in, just chime in on?
No, I think you've hit on all those important points for them. I think we like the designs, the design of this system. Question is, the issue is what you've identified.
Okay.
Make it workable.
Lighting was next on the list.
Okay.
This was option A or B.
Yeah, was it this was called Tivoli, is that what those?
No, that's the bulbs, that's the bulbs above.
Oh,
The
okay.
row of bulbs
Like a
above
carriage light.
is the tip.
What's
Kind of
that?
like a carriage light.
The carriage lights
And
down?
option B?
Yeah.
Is that option B, is that how it
Yeah.
was listed on
Right,
this?
wasn't
The one on the right?
Yeah, one on the right.
Double light, okay.
So I guess that's what we would recommend.
So we'd like the carriage light. We also were okay with the variation of height. Higher, we were okay with the higher ones in the center in order to accommodate banners and
Right.
that sort of thing.
And lower ones perhaps in residential and other
Right.
areas.
Okay. We're comfortable with the explanation of that we're going to have directed LEDs, it sounds like it's under control. Okay. All right, planters and seats, what's the other one?
What's that, Bob? Planters, you said?
Planters in the street, the plant, what's that?
Planters in the main.
Yeah,
On the edge of the
planters and,
sidewalk.
yeah, around the edge of the sidewalk and the seating and feedback you wanted regarding how those sections were laid out, bike rack, bench, planters, should the planters probably have seats, I think is one of the things we said.
Yes, sir.
What did he call those, seat walls, seat?
Yeah.
Seat walls. Okay, so we're good with that?
All right. Just the road closure, what's the other one?
Bollard sleeves.
Bollards and sleeves.
What's that called?
Bollards and sleeves.
Bollards
Yep.
and sleeves. Good on that? Okay. Yeah?
Yes.
Good idea.
All right, just a correction on the inconsistency, and I think that's a given, to fix the inconsistent parking numbers. Okay. Bike racks and feedback, Bob, you'd mentioned proprietary styles. Is there some concern around that?
Well, those ones are custom. I'm just saying, everything we were looking at today is very custom. It's going to be expensive, so,
Do we
drive
care?
the budget up, do we care?
Yeah, I mean, if it drives our maintenance budget up later,
Oh, yeah.
it's probably what
I mean-
the issue is, not,
Not really.
yeah.
Drives your construction budget, drives your maintenance budget.
But this whole thing is pretty high-end, so.
Yeah, the more unique it gets, the less street it is.
Yes.
We all like them? That was fine.
Say that again? Lost that one.
We all like them, but we're fine. We like
Talking about
racks.
bicycle
The
racks.
bicycle
Bike
racks.
racks.
Yeah.
Yeah, custom bike rack.
Scooters on this, parking on the sidewalks, we want to address that, or, I mean, I just know it's coming, I see them all over Boulder, that's why I'm bringing it up, because I don't mind them, I think they're fine, more and more people are getting them, and
a town center is more likely to draw them than
Yeah.
what we see now. I mean, I know they're not driving to Costco, but,
About the three-wheel electric scooter.
or no, even just, general two-wheel scooters, ADCC, gasoline-driven. I mean, they're allowed on the sidewalks per state law, and at least Boulder allows them, but maybe it's a city law, or, what are we allowed? Do we
Bless you.
going to address it? We don't need to address it. Okay.
Are you saying they allow them to be ridden?
No, they can be parked on the
They can be
sidewalk
parked
by
on the
bike racks if
sidewalk.
they're under ADCCs. The larger ones can't. They have to park in a parking space. And
Okay.
We'll have to review that.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, I brought it up, but
That's okay. Fair question.
I know it's coming, so.
I don't know that we add that to the condition list. No, we just
I don't
leave
think so
that.
yet.
Okay.
Ask staff to maybe look into that and make sure we address that. Probably gonna come up. All right.
We're going to go out and buy 3 scooters.
All right, and furnishings? Bob, you brought up furnishings.
Well, I don't know, furnishings, site furnishings are the bench, the waste receptacle, everything else. Cov follows the bicycle rack thing.
Yeah.
You know, you like the custom thing, or
Oh, dear.
I think that kind of falls into the bike rack category of bike rack / furnishings.
We're okay with them.
Proposed. Okay.
Okay. Let's see, then there's the sidewalk width. We okay with the sidewalk width?
Width, okay.
9 feet, even that, and that's, I don't think that's everywhere. I think there are just places where there's buildings and tree planters and some areas that are 9 feet wide. I'm trying to think of about 4 people walking across, but
Well, it isn't.
you do still,
It's this way.
Yeah, it's coming. I think you're fine. You think it might be a little close, but I think it's fine.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns.
All right, so we won't even bring that up. Leave it up. Okay. And then, in the roundabout art,
Well, it's art, and you know, there is a particular place where we put it in the design guide, is that we wanted public art.
well, what Rita was bringing up
I know.
was similar to what we have in the
Sculpture.
town center and having a sculpture in the center.
It's a decision that can be made when I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if
You want to
that's-
make a recommendation that we have or don't have? I don't care.
I don't know if we address that now. Suggest that I'm nervous about it because I find that high wall in that roundabout here to be actually challenging already because you can't see.
See around it.
You can't see through the roundabout. I can't see what's going on up there, so, yeah, so it's, there's trees, there's trees in there anyway, so we may have to get trees.
I think the trees are sufficient.
We just leave it be, all right.
plus
If somebody wants,
the art gets plowed through by some truck, it goes.
well, or if the art wants to get donated by some kind person with this beautiful sculpture, then we can debate it. How's that?
So my concern had nothing to do whether it was art or trees, it had to do with the visibility through the.
Yeah, no, I
Just visibility
understand.
through the roundabout, so, and whether there's any concerns around the visibility going through the roundabout.
All right.
I like the one down at McCaslin and Colton. It seems easy to navigate, it's easy to see.
Yeah. You can actually see what's coming.
Okay, so we got 6 items?
Yes, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items, yeah.
Okay.
There's 2 on the cover memo that have been talked about as the minor technical and red line corrections. And the temporary parking needs to have lighting. That's staff's recommendation to add those conditions, so I don't know if
That sounds good. I think the temporary parking does need lighting. You do solar, so you don't have to worry about electrical. Huh? Can't talk to him, I forgot.
Oh, no, that's the end.
Sorry about that.
Any discussion on the temporary lighting for parking lot?
Yeah, temporary parking.
Lighting for the temporary parking lot. Anybody have any feelings one way or the other?
I think we need lighting.
Yeah, I think they,
Especially since they're doing it.
The one should. Yeah, I think that would be a wise thing to have.
Okay.
Yeah. We talked about that, okay. So the other 2 items, well, the minor, the red light connections, which I think are fine, and then there's the temporary parking.
Yep.
Making sure lighting is addressed in that,
Yep.
so, okay. we're okay with that.
And just for clarification, I noticed both on Commissioner McCool's and mine, we don't have the second page of this
Yeah, right.
resolution. Nobody seems to have the second page of the resolution.
No,
but we'll make sure that
Oh, look at
it's
1-3.
put in there. And it's basically the same as the final plat, so with the conditions.
With the conditions?
Yeah.
Make a motion? Okay. All right, so I'll make a motion for the resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior, resolution number PC-6, recommending approval of the final development plan, Phase 1, case number FDP 2013-1 for Superior Town Center streets and utilities, with the following conditions: that minor and technical red line corrections as identified by staff shall be made, that street pole heights need to be, let's see, so we said, this said 16 feet, but we're okay with 18 feet in the main areas and lower, and are we, is it 16
Shorter.
feet in the
18
walkway?
feet in the
Shorter.
town core, 16 in the outer residential areas.
Okay. Is that what we mean by lower? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, there's got to be
Well, like in that
16 feet.
16,
Hmm.
yeah, in that 16-foot ranges with the design guidelines.
Okay,
And
so
those-
so even the pedestrian areas need to be at 16, we can go higher in the, on the main streets?
Correct.
You had 1 and 18, okay, so streetlight poles need to be 18, or, well, I guess we're recommending 18 feet for the main
Public.
public roads
areas.
and 16 feet for pedestrian areas.
Correct.
Okay. That the temporary parking area,
Well, back to the lighting, not necessarily pedestrian areas, but the residential.
Resident, okay.
Residential.
Outside of the core.
Yeah.
Okay, residential and pedestrian, because it's the town square too, right? Yes, so residential and pedestrian areas.
Good.
Okay. That the temporary parking needs to have lighting. We'd like to ask the town board to consider issues with the pavers, specifically taking a close look at the type and design, consider the uneven surfaces and seams in pedestrian areas. There's a specific concern about flagstone surfaces and whether that works well for pedestrian areas. But in general, we like the designs. In the area of lighting.
On pavers, you want to add warranty.
Oh, yeah, we did talk, yeah.
Separate warranties.
Installation warranty.
Right. And product.
Consideration be given to product warranty and installation warranty.
Well, and do the guidelines actually point to the need for it all to be pavers?
Well, yeah, we said that, yeah, that was actually the first line item, yep, was that, yep. Close look at the type and design, and like we can say whether they're needed throughout the development. I think from a warranty standpoint, we'd consider wanting to get more than a typical 2 years out of the installation, if we can. I think that's what Alex was going to look into, but this is just a recommendation, so. All right. Good on the papers. All right, in the lighting area, we liked option B, or the carriage lights throughout. We like the variation of the height, it's higher in the streets, lower in residential areas, as you mentioned in item 2 of the conditions. In the area of planters, we like the idea of putting seating walls with planters throughout the development. We consider bollards and sleeves for the road closure area on Main Street and Promenade. Those 2 areas. That the corrections get made to the inconsistent parking numbers between the narrative and the plan. And then, I guess this isn't really a condition, so that's the other conditions, and I think that the comment that we actually like, we like the bike racks and the furnishings, that RC requested feedback on that. We like the current furnishings as are laid out in the plan, as well as the bike racks. So.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Poole. Second by Commissioner Eaton. Any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. All those in favor? Passes unanimous. Okay. Final development plan. Number one is done. The next item on our agenda is staff announcements, miscellaneous. Anything from staff?
We do have some staff announcements. The town board has interviewed 4 candidates for the opening on the planning commission. They interviewed those 4 on October 28th. They will interview 2 more candidates on the Tuesday upcoming board meeting due to the Veterans Day holiday. The board meeting is on Tuesday, November 12th. And they'll confirm the time of the interviews with you as soon as that's available. November 19th planning commission meeting right now is scheduled for an update on the transportation plan. And the third item is Boulder Creek Builders will be bringing a concept plan for the town board on the November 25th town board meeting, or excuse me, town board work session regarding the eastern portion of the Comonte property. And you are all encouraged to attend that board meeting or that work session that night to hear their concept plan.
It'll be at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
That was November 25th.
November 25th.
Okay, anything further? Any announcements or anything from the board? Okay, thanks for everyone's time. We're adjourned.